Welcome back to the Abyss. To those who have walked these corridors of horror with me before, thank you. Your presence in this endless night gives strength to the voice that carries these stories. And for those who are new, step carefully. Here in the Abyss, once you enter, there is no true escape. If you dare to tread further, subscribe and bind yourself to the horrors we uncover. Tonight, we descend into the tomb worlds of the Sautekh Dynasty. We walk in the cold shadow of eternity. This is not the tale of life, but of what remains after life has been stripped away. The story we tell tonight is the deadly life of a Necron Overlord in the Sautekh Dynasty. Let us begin. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But some wars are not fought with bolters and chainswords. Some wars rage within the mind itself, where sanity battles against the impossible weight of eternity. What I am about to tell you is the testimony of something that was once human, something that chose immortality and received damnation. This is the confession of Overlord Aindra of the Sautekh Dynasty, recorded in the dying moments before his final transformation into something beyond even the horror he had already become. Listen carefully, for in his madness there lies a truth more terrifying than any Xenos threat or chaos corruption. The truth that sometimes the greatest enemy is time itself. I am. The thought struggles through circuits of living metal, through pathways that should not exist. My name. What was my name? The awakening protocols flood my consciousness with data streams, but beneath them, something else stirs. Something that should have been purged 60 million years ago. My optical sensors flicker online. Green light pierces the darkness of my tomb chamber, casting everything in the sickly glow of resurrection technology. I am Overlord Aindra of the Sautekh Dynasty. I know this because the command protocols tell me so. They flow through my consciousness like poison, each one reinforcing my identity, my purpose, my eternal servitude. But there's something else, a whisper in the static between thoughts. Sarah. The name hits me like a plasma bolt to the chest. Sarah. Who is Sarah? The diagnostic systems run their cycles, checking weapon systems, analyzing threat assessments, but that name echoes through my skull like a prayer in an empty cathedral. I rise from the resurrection chamber, my form towering 9 feet into the stale air of the tomb. Living metal flows like mercury over my frame, ancient technologies responding to my will before I even know what I desire. This is power. This is what we bargained for when we accepted the Citan's gift. But as I take my first steps in over 10,000 years, I feel it. The weight, not the weight of my metal body, but something heavier. The weight of every moment I have experienced, stretching back across an ocean of time so vast that human minds would shatter just contemplating its scope. The tomb around me is a monument to our glory. Obsidian walls carved with hieroglyphs that tell the story of the Great Sleep. Corridors that stretch for miles underground, housing millions of my dynasty warriors. All of it responds to my presence, ancient machine spirits acknowledging their master's return. But in the reflection of the polished surfaces, I see something that makes my immortal mind recoil. My face, if it can be called that, is a skull of living metal, eye sockets burning with eldritch fire. When did I stop looking human? When did this metal shell become my prison? The memories try to surface, but they're fragmented, corrupted by aeons of storage in quantum matrices. I remember flesh, warm flesh, the sensation of breath filling lungs that no longer exists, the feel of a heartbeat that will never thunder in my chest again. Sarah, please don't leave me. The voice is my own, but from a time when I had a voice of flesh and blood. The tomb's systems register a fluctuation in my neural matrices, but I silence the alarms. No one must know that something of the man I once was still survives in this mechanical hell. I stride through the corridors of my domain, my footsteps echoing like funeral bells. The resurrection chambers stretch endlessly in all directions, each one containing another soul condemned to this existence. Some are already awakening, drawn to consciousness by my presence. Their optical sensors flicker to life like grave lights, and I see in them the same hollow emptiness that must shine from my own eyes. But as I pass the chamber of WH40K, one of my most trusted immortals, I catch something in his optical flare that shouldn't be there. Recognition, not just of my rank or authority, but something deeper, something human. He remembers too. The realization hits me like a cold wave. We are not the glorious immortal beings that the propaganda of our resurrection promises. We are prisoners, every last one of us, trapped in shells of living metal, forced to serve masters who promised us godhood and delivered damnation. I reach the primary command chamber, a vast sphere carved from a single piece of blackstone, its walls covered in tactical displays showing the positions of fleets across the galaxy. The Sautekh Dynasty's reach is vast, our power undeniable. Star systems burn at our command, entire worlds are harvested for their resources, and billions of lesser beings kneel before our advance. And yet, as I stand in the center of all this power, I feel more alone than I ever did in the darkness of the tomb. The communicator chimes with an incoming transmission. The hieroglyphs that appear on the display make my metal heart sink, a summons from the silent king himself. Zarak, the one who led us all into this nightmare, wishes to speak with his faithful servants. But as I prepare to respond, something else flickers across the display. A face, barely visible for a nanosecond in the static between transmissions. A woman's face, kind eyes, a smile that once made me feel. What was love like? The journey to respond to the Silent King's summons should be routine. Command protocols flow through my consciousness, each one precisely calibrated to suppress any deviation from my ordained purpose. But as my scarab-form ship cuts through the void between worlds, those suppression protocols begin to crack. It starts with dreams. How can something without the capacity to sleep experience dreams? Yet in the spaces between active thought, in the nanoseconds when my consciousness transfers between processing nodes, I see fragments of another life. A woman with dark hair laughing at something I said. The joke is lost to time, but her laughter echoes through my metal skull like the ring of crystal. Sarah. Her name was Sarah, and she was mine. Not in the way a Necron Overlord owns property, but in the way that two souls choose to intertwine their fates. I had a soul once. The ship's auto-systems register fluctuations in my neural matrix, but I've learned to mask them. 60 million years of practice have taught me to hide the cracks in my programming. The other Necrons would see these memories as weaknesses, as contamination that threatens our perfect unity of purpose. They would be right. Another fragment surfaces, small hands reaching for me. A child's voice calling me what? The name dissolves like smoke, but the emotion remains. Love. Pure, uncomplicated love that asks nothing in return but my presence. When was the last time someone looked at me without fear, without the cold calculation of tactical assessment? I remember teaching him to read. The way his eyes lit up when he finally grasped that these strange symbols held meaning, held stories. I remember the weight of his small body against my chest as I read to him before sleep, his breathing gradually slowing until the memory cuts off like a severed cable. My son, I had a son. The ship's cogitators chime with arrival protocols, but I barely register them. Through the viewport, I can see the rendezvous point, a dead world that once teemed with life, now nothing but a grey wasteland dotted with the massive tomb complexes of the Sautekh Dynasty. Millions of my kind sleep beneath that lifeless surface, waiting for the call to war. But I'm not seeing the tomb world. I'm seeing another planet, green and vibrant, with cities that touch the clouds and oceans that sparkled under a gentle sun. Our world. The world we traded for this eternity of service. The transformation chambers. I remember them now. In fragments so sharp they cut through my consciousness like monomolecular blades. The promises the Citan made. Freedom from disease, from aging, from the weakness of flesh. They spoke of godhood, of power beyond imagination. They never mentioned the dreams would stop. My shuttle touches down on the tomb world's surface, with barely a whisper of displaced dust. The atmospheric processes have long since failed, leaving nothing but a vacuum and the bitter cold of space. But I don't need air. It doesn't feel cold. These metal bodies are supremely adapted to survive in the void between stars. Perfect machines of war, empty of everything that once made us human. The entrance to the primary tomb complex yawns before me like the mouth of some vast predator. Hieroglyphs carved deep into the living metal walls tell the story of our glorious transformation, our ascension to immortality. But as I pass beneath them, I see something else in their angular shapes. I see the faces of everyone I left behind. Sarah, dying of the plague that swept our world in its final years. Our son was wasting away as the toxins in our atmosphere finally overwhelmed his small body. The billions of our people who were deemed unworthy of transformation were left to die as our world was stripped of its life-giving essence. The Citan fed well that day. Deep within the tomb complex, the corridors branch out like arteries in some vast mechanical heart. Each passage leads to chambers containing thousands of my dynasty's warriors, but tonight they lead me to something else. To a chamber I haven't entered in millennia. My personal archive. The room is small by the standards of our architecture, barely 100 feet on each side. But its walls contain the digitized memories of my pre-transformation life. Every Necron Overlord has such an archive, officially maintained for tactical reference and cultural preservation. In reality, they're mausoleums, tombs for the people we used to be. I interface with the archive's systems, and the walls come alive with holographic displays. Scenes from a life I can barely remember living. Sarah and I were on our bonding day, her smile radiant despite the grey skies that never seemed to clear in those final years. Our son is taking his first steps, his laughter filling a home that feels impossibly warm and alive. And then the darker memories, the council meetings where we debated the Citan's offer, the growing desperation as our world died around us. The terrible mathematics of survival convinced us that this was our only choice. In one display, I watch myself arguing passionately about the transformation. We will be gods, I tell the assembled nobles, my flesh voice cracking with conviction. Our children will inherit the stars themselves. My children inherited nothing. They died screaming as their world was consumed to fuel our resurrection. But there's one memory that makes my immortal frame shudder. The last conversation with Sarah as she lay dying in the medical facility, which had become more morgue than hospital. She knew what I intended to do. She knew about the transformation. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the life support systems. "Promise me you'll remember what it feels like to love." I promised her. And then I chose eternity over the grave. The archive systems register an unauthorized access attempt. Someone is trying to breach my personal files. I spin around, weapon systems coming online automatically, to find another figure standing in the chamber's entrance. WH40K, my most trusted lieutenant, his own optical sensors dim with what might be shameful. "My lord," he says, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't be possible in our mechanical vocal systems. Harmonics that sound almost human. "I have come to confess something terrible." His optical sensors flicker, and for just a moment, I see not the face of a deathless warrior, but the features of a man I once knew. A man who served in my household guard, who protected my family, who called me by my birth name instead of my title. "I remember her too," he whispers. "The throne chamber of Zarak lies at the very heart of the complex, a vast cathedral of living metal and flowing energy. As we approach, the walls themselves seem to whisper his titles. The Silent King, the Last Pharaoh, the Betrayer of the Citan. Each name carries the weight of history, the terrible gravity of decisions that condemned entire species to extinction. But I know another title that the walls don't whisper. The fool who believed the Citan's promises. The fool who led us all into damnation wearing the mask of salvation. The chamber doors, each one the size of a city gate, swing open with the deep resonance of temple bells. Beyond them lies a space so vast that its far walls disappear into darkness. And at its center, on a throne carved from the crystallized dreams of 1 billion dead worlds, sits the architect of our torment, Zarak, the Silent King. Even after all these aeons, his presence is overwhelming. This is the being who once held every Necron in his will, like puppets dancing on invisible strings. The biotransference that made us immortal also made us slaves, our consciousness subordinated to his divine authority. But something has changed since the Great Awakening began. The chains of absolute control have loosened, leaving us with just enough free will to understand our imprisonment. Perhaps that was the cruelest joke of all. Overlord Aindra, the Silent King, speaks, and his voice is the sound of civilizations falling. "Approach your sovereign." I walk forward, each step measured and precise. Around me, hundreds of other overlords from across the Sautekh Dynasty stand in perfect formation, their optical sensors fixed unwaveringly on their master. But I catch something in their postures, a subtle tension that wasn't there in the early days of our awakening. Even here, in the presence of our absolute ruler, the cracks are showing. "You have served the dynasty well," Zarak continues as I stop before his throne. "Your tactical brilliance has brought a dozen systems under our dominion. The lesser species flee before your advance like prey before the hunter." I feel the compulsion to respond with pride, with gratitude for his acknowledgement. The command protocols still wired into my consciousness demand that I bask in his approval. But underneath them, something rebels. "I am your servant, my king," I reply, the words tasting like ashes in my mechanical vocal cords. "Indeed you are." His optical sensors fix on me with the intensity of dying stars. "But there have been irregularities in your recent campaigns. Unnecessary preservation of enemy infrastructure. Curious hesitation when dealing with civilian populations. Some of your fellow overlords have expressed concern about your efficiency." The accusation hangs in the air like a blade. Around me, I can feel the attention of the other overlords, some curious, others openly hostile. In the rigid hierarchy of the Sautekh Dynasty, any sign of weakness is blood in the water. I ensure maximum resource acquisition for the dynasty. I respond carefully. Preserved infrastructure serves our long-term strategic interests better than simple destruction. Practical. Logical. Zarak leans forward on his throne, and the gesture somehow makes him seem even more alien, more removed from anything that once drew breath, but not passionate. Where is the fire that once drove you to greatness, Ankh Taharka? Where is the hunger for conquest that made you one of my most valued servants? The question strikes deeper than he realizes. Where is that fire? When did the endless procession of worlds and the screaming of their inhabitants stop filling me with the intoxicating rush of power? When did victory start tasting like defeat? I know the answer, but I cannot speak it aloud. The fire died the moment I truly understood what we had become. It died when I realized that every world we conquered, every population we enslaved or destroyed, was just another repetition of our own tragedy. We had become the Satan we thought we had defeated, consuming life itself to fuel our hollow existence. Speak truthfully to your king, Zarak commands, and I feel the full weight of his authority pressing down on my consciousness. The compulsion to obey burns through my neural pathways like acid, but somehow I resist. Somehow the ghost of the man I once was finds the strength to lie to a god. I serve the dynasty with all the devotion of my immortal existence, I say. Any perceived hesitation is merely the careful calculation of resources. I waste nothing that might serve the Sautekh's glory. For a moment, the silent king is truly silent. His optical sensors dim to the faintest glow as he processes my response. Around me, the assembled overlords wait like statues, their own consciousness locked in stasis until their master's judgment is rendered. There is wisdom in your caution, Zarak finally says. But wisdom without will is mere cowardice. You will prove your dedication to the dynasty. The Eldar of Craft World Ul-Kaith have been raiding our outer territories. You will take the Crimson Harvest Fleet and end them. Not capture, not subjugation, extermination. The command settles into my neural pathways like a virus, rewriting my priorities, my objectives, my very purpose. But underneath the compulsion, that small voice that remembers Sarah, that remembers my son, screams in protest. The Eldar, an ancient race, almost as old as we are, but still possessing something we lost in the biotransference. Souls, mortal, fragile souls that burn with the fire of life. To exterminate them entirely would be to snuff out something irreplaceable, something human. It shall be done, my king, I hear myself say, and the words feel like betrayal. But as I turn to leave the throne chamber, something extraordinary happens. One of the other overlords, Sautekh the Destroyer, steps slightly out of formation. For just a nanosecond, his optical sensors meet mine, and in that gaze, I see something impossible. Pity. The realization follows me as I leave the Silent King's presence. I am not alone in my torment. We are all prisoners here, every last one of us. The mighty Sautekh Dynasty, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, is nothing more than a galactic prison where the inmates have been convinced that they are the guards. Vok Thasis falls into step beside me as we return to my ship. Neither of us speaks until we're safely within my private chambers, shielded from the dynasty's surveillance systems. The mission, he says finally. Will be completed, I reply, but the words feel hollow. And the Eldar children in their nursery vaults? The question hits me like a physical blow. Children. The Eldar raise their young in protection chambers deep within their craft worlds, keeping them safe from the horrors of a galaxy at war. In my tactical briefings, they're classified as non-combatant biological assets. In my memories, they're something else entirely. They're the children I couldn't save. The mission will be completed, I repeat, but this time my voice cracks with static that sounds almost like weeping. The awakening of the Legion is a sight that would drive mortal minds to madness. Row upon row of resurrection chambers cycle through their activation sequences, each one disgorging another immortal warrior into the ranks of my army. 10,000 Necron immortals, each one a perfect killing machine, each one carrying the trapped soul of someone who once laughed, wept, and dreamed. I stand on the observation deck of the Eternal Harvester, my flagship, watching the assembly below. My warriors move with inhuman precision, their every action coordinated through the command protocols that link their consciousness to mine. With a thought, I can direct their movements. With a gesture, I can reshape their formations. They are extensions of my will, as much a part of me as my own limbs. But as I watch them, I see something that chills my immortal soul. In their perfect synchronization, their absolute obedience, I see myself. A puppet dancing to commands I don't fully understand, serving purposes that bring me no joy, no satisfaction, no peace. Fleet status report, I command. And the bridge comes alive with activity. Officers and crew members who aren't truly officers or crew, just specialized variants of the same basic template. The bridge officer was once perhaps a navigator on merchant vessels, dreaming of distant stars. The weapons coordinator might have been a teacher, patiently explaining the wonders of the universe to eager young minds. Now they are all simply extensions of the Sautekh Dynasty's will. All vessels report ready for translation, my fleet coordinator announces. The Crimson Harvest awaits your command, my lord. The Crimson Harvest, 15 capital ships, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. Dozens of escort vessels, fast attack craft, and support ships. A force sufficient to crack open a craft world like an egg and devour the life within. I should feel pride at commanding such power. In the early years after our awakening, I did. The sight of enemy fleets fleeing before my advance filled me with intoxicating satisfaction. But now, standing here preparing to lead another campaign of extermination, I feel only the weight of what's to come. The Eldar of Craft World Ulkaith. I've studied their tactical profiles, their ship configurations, and their population centers. 3 million souls living aboard a single, massive vessel, fleeing through the void from the consequences of their ancestors' excess. They are elegant, beautiful in their own alien way, and utterly doomed. My tactical assessments give them a 0.003% chance of survival against the force I'm bringing to bear. Those aren't odds. That's not even a rounding error. That's a guarantee of genocide. Initiate translation sequence, I command, and the bridge crew moves with mechanical precision to execute my orders. The Eternal Harvester shudders as its ancient drives tear a hole in reality itself. Around us, the other ships of the fleet follow suit, their own inertialess drives carving passages through dimensions that don't technically exist. We travel not through space, but through the spaces between space, following paths laid down by technology so advanced that even we don't fully understand it. But as we slide into the nightmare realm of faster-than-light travel, I find my consciousness drifting back to memories I should have discarded millennia ago. Another fleet, another time. Back when I still breathed, I still felt my heart beating in my chest. I was commanding a defense squadron during the final wars before biotransference, trying to protect evacuation ships carrying the last refugees from our dying world. Sarah was aboard one of those ships. So was our son. The enemy that day wasn't alien. It was ourselves, other Necrontyr who had already undergone transformation, who had been sent back to cleanse our world of its remaining population. Even then, before we fully understood what we were becoming, we were being forced to destroy everything we had once protected. I remember standing on the bridge of my command ship, watching the transformed vessels of my former allies bearing down on the refugee convoy. I remember the moment when I realized I could not stop them, could not save the people I loved most in all the universe. I remember the choice I made. The evacuation ships died burning, every last one of them. Sarah died, my son died, 10 million others died, all so that I could maintain my position, preserve my command authority, and ensure my own eventual transformation. I told myself it was necessary, that the greater good demanded sacrifice. I was already becoming a monster before they put me in this metal shell. The translation alarm chimes, dragging me back to the present. Through the bridge's main viewport, I can see the normal space of the Ulkathi system resolving around us. A single star, burning white-hot at the center of a debris field that was once a thriving solar system. And there, at the edge of detection range, the elegant curves of an Eldar craft world. Target acquired, my weapons coordinator reports. Craft world Ulkath, bearing mark 77 by elevation plus 15. Distance, 12,000 kilometers. They're attempting to maneuver away, but their acceleration curve indicates they cannot escape our intercept window. Life signs, I ask, though I already know the answer. Approximately 3 million Eldar aboard the craft world. Scanning indicates civilian populations in the outer rings, military formations concentrating around key defensive positions. They know we're coming. Of course they do. The Eldar have always possessed a limited ability to see the future, to catch glimpses of what's to come. They've probably known about this attack for months, maybe years. They've had time to prepare, to evacuate their children, to position their forces for maximum defensive effectiveness. None of it will matter. Begin attack pattern terminus, I command. All ships are to target structural weak points in sequence. I want the craft world disabled, not destroyed. The Silent King's orders were specific. The fleet spreads out in a formation that took us 10,000 years to perfect. Each ship knows its role, its targeting priorities, its responsibility in the grand choreography of destruction. The Eldar vessels that rise to meet us are beautiful. Sleek, graceful ships that dance through space like living creatures. But they're outnumbered 20 to 1, and our weapons can unmake matter at the molecular level. The first exchange of fire lights up the void between our fleets. Eldar pulse weaponry, powered by the psychic energy of their crews, meets Necron Gauss arrays that can strip the electrons from atoms. Their ships are fast, agile, crewed by warriors who fight with the desperate fury of a race facing extinction. Our ships are inexorable, methodical, crewed by beings who cannot feel fear or doubt or mercy. It's not a battle, it's a dissection. One by one, the Eldar escort ships die. Their death screams, broadcast on psychic frequencies that my mechanical form shouldn't be able to perceive, somehow reach me anyway. Each ship that dies takes with it hundreds of souls, beings who once felt joy and sorrow, who created art and music and poetry that could make the stars themselves weep. And I am their executioner. But as the craft world's outer defenses fall and my ships close in for the final assault, I catch something on the long-range scanners that makes my immortal heart clench with an emotion I thought I had forgotten. Escape pods, dozens of them, each one carrying perhaps 50 to 100 Eldar. They're not fleeing towards safety. There is no safety from the Sautekh Dynasty. They're fleeing towards me. It takes me several nanoseconds to understand what I'm seeing, and when I do, the realization nearly crashes my neural matrices. They're not running away, they're surrendering. The surrender is mathematically perfect. The Eldar escape pods approach my flagship in a formation that presents no tactical threat, their weapon systems powered down, their psychic emanations muted to barely perceptible whispers. Every aspect of their approach screams of capitulation, of a defeated enemy seeking mercy from their conquerors. Logic dictates my response. The Silent King's orders were explicit: extermination, not subjugation. These beings are to be erased from existence, not preserved as prisoners or slaves. My tactical parameters are clear, my objectives unambiguous. But as the first pod draws close enough for detailed scanning, my enhanced sensors pick up biometric readings that send cascades of corrupted data through my neural pathways. Children, not warriors, not even adults. Children, ranging in age from what humans would call infancy to perhaps the equivalent of 12 standard years. 47 young Eldar, accompanied by what appears to be a single adult caretaker, are drifting helplessly in the void between my guns and their dying craft world. The logical response calculates itself instantly. A single Gauss flare burst would vaporize the pod and its contents in 0.003 seconds. Quick, clean, efficient. The next pod is already approaching, and the next after that. 17 escape pods in total, carrying what my scanners estimate to be just over 600 Eldar civilians. My targeting systems lock on automatically. The command to fire forms itself in my consciousness, traveling down neural pathways that have been grooved by millions of similar decisions across thousands of battlefields. This is what I am built for. This is what the biotransference made me, the perfect instrument of genocide. But the command doesn't transmit to my weapons. Instead, I find my attention focused on a single biometric reading from the lead escape pod. A heartbeat, rapid and irregular with fear. 140 beats per minute, the rhythm of a terrified child who has watched their entire world burn and now faces whatever mercy their destroyers might choose to show. When was the last time I heard a heartbeat? My lord, my weapons coordinator's voice carries a note of confusion that shouldn't be possible in a Necron's vocal patterns. Target lock is established, awaiting firing command. The words stick in my vocal cords like rust in ancient machinery. Around me, the bridge crew waits with mechanical patience for orders that should be as natural as breathing, if any of us still drew breath. Scan the pods again, I hear myself say. Full biometric analysis. I need detailed information on their occupants. My lord, the tactical situation. Execute the scan. The sensor arrays focus their attention on the approaching vessels, and the data that floods my consciousness is like acid poured into an open wound. Not just children, but families. Parents clutching infants, older siblings shielding younger ones, grandparents whose long lifespans have given them wisdom enough to know that they are about to die. And something else. Something that makes my immortal frame shudder with recognition. In the 7th pod, pressed against the small viewing port, I see a face that could have been Sarah's. Not identical, this is an alien being, with the pointed ears and elongated features of the Eldar race. But something in her expression, some quality of desperate maternal love as she holds a small child close to her chest, tears at programming that was supposed to have eliminated such weakness. The child in her arms cannot be more than 2 years old by human standards. It stares out at my massive warship with the fearless curiosity of the very young, tiny hands pressed against the transparent aluminum as if trying to reach out and touch the stars. My son had looked at me like that once, with complete trust, absolute certainty that his father would protect him from all the darkness in the universe. I had failed him. I had let him die screaming on a world consumed by machines that bore my name and served my dynasty. But I don't have to fail this child. The thought surfaces from some deep archive in my consciousness, from pathways that should have been severed by the biotransference. It carries with it the weight of organic emotion, the terrible burden of choice that machines are supposed to be free from. My lord, The voice belongs to Vok Tharsis, transmitted directly to my command throne via encrypted military channels. The fleet is awaiting your orders. I can hear the question he's not asking, the doubt that mirrors my own. In his tone, I catch echoes of the man he used to be, the household guard who once taught my son to hold a sword, who wept when the transformation chambers claimed another friend. He remembers too, and he's waiting to see if I remember enough to matter. The logical choice presents itself again, cold and clean and utterly without redemption. 17 Gauss cannon bursts, 623 lives ended in less than 5 seconds. Mission parameters fulfilled, dynasty honor maintained, Silent King's will enacted without deviation. But as I prepare to give the order, another memory surfaces. Not from the archives this time, but from the deepest core of my consciousness, from the place where the man I used to be still screams in his metal prison. Sarah, on the day our son was born, was exhausted and radiant, and more beautiful than any star in the galaxy. "Promise me," she had whispered, as she placed the tiny bundle in my arms. "Promise me you'll always protect him, no matter what it costs." I had promised, and then I had to let the cost become too high. "New orders," I transmit to the fleet, my voice cutting through the tactical chatter like a blade. "The escape pods are not to be fired upon. Bring them aboard the Eternal Harvester. Minimum force protocols are in effect." The silence that follows is deafening. On 17 bridges across my fleet, Necron commanders process an order that violates every parameter of their mission. Some part of me wonders if they'll refuse, if the loyalty protocols embedded in their neural matrices will force them to report my deviation to higher command. But the tractor beams engage, and one by one, the Eldar escape pods are drawn into my flagship's docking bays. I have just committed an act of treason against the Sautekh Dynasty. More than that, I have committed an act of mercy. And for the first time in 60 million years, I feel something that might once have been called hope. The craft world Ulkatha burns in the distance, its elegant spires collapsing as my fleet's bombardment reduces it to molten slag. 3 million Eldar die as their world dies, their souls screaming into the warp as they join the ranks of the galaxy's countless dead. But 623 live. 623 heartbeats continue their ancient rhythm, carrying within them something that the biotransference was supposed to have purged from the universe. The possibility that even monsters can choose to remember what they used to be. As the final escape pod settles into my docking bay, its occupants huddled together in terror, I realize I have crossed a line from which there can be no return. I am no longer just a Necron Overlord. I am a traitor to my own species. The interrogation chambers of the Eternal Harvester were designed by minds that had forgotten what mercy looked like. Featureless metal walls that can shift and reshape themselves to accommodate any form of torture. Neural interfaces that can extract information by peeling back consciousness, layer by layer, and devices that can extend the agony of death across centuries. But I don't take my prisoners there. Instead, I convert one of the lesser cargo bays into something resembling livable space. The Eldar huddle together in family groups, their elegant forms seeming almost ethereal in the harsh illumination of my ship's lighting systems. They watch me with eyes that hold the accumulated wisdom of a race that has seen the rise and fall of empires, but also with the simple terror of creatures who know they are at the mercy of something that should not exist. Why? The voice belongs to the female I noticed earlier, the one who reminded me so painfully of Sarah. She steps forward from the group with courage that speaks of nobility, of leadership bred into her very bones. Why do you spare us when you destroyed our world? Her words carry the musical quality of the Eldar language, but my translation protocols render them in the harsh mechanical tones of Necron speech. Still, something in her voice penetrates the layers of programming that insulate my consciousness from organic emotion. I should tell her it was a tactical necessity, that prisoners serve some strategic purpose in the greater campaign. The Sautekh Dynasty requires information that only living Eldar can provide. All of these would be acceptable explanations, justifications that my superiors might accept without triggering loyalty investigations. Instead, I tell her the truth. Because I have a son. The words emerge from my vocal cords like a confession, like a prayer spoken in a dead language. The Eldar woman's eyes widen with something that might be understanding, or might simply be deeper confusion at the thought of a machine claiming parenthood. Had, I correct myself, the word carrying all the weight of 60 million years of loss. I had a son. For the next several standard days, as my fleet continues its patrol route through the outer systems of the Sautekh Dynasty, I find myself drawn again and again to the cargo bay that has become a refugee camp. I tell myself it's a tactical assessment, an evaluation of enemy capabilities and cultural structures. But that's a lie, and I've grown tired of lying to myself. I go there because they're alive, in a universe where I am surrounded by mechanical puppets wearing the memories of the dead. These Eldar represent something I had almost forgotten existed. They sleep and dream. They speak to each other not through data transfers and command protocols, but with voices that carry emotion, inflection, the subtle music of organic thought. They grieve for their lost world, comfort their children, and plan for an uncertain future. They hope. The child I noticed in the escape pod, the one who pressed his hands against the viewport with such fearless curiosity, has adapted to captivity with the resilience of the very young. He explores every corner of the makeshift living space, chattering in the liquid syllables of his native tongue, occasionally approaching close enough to my observation post to stare up at my towering form with unblinking fascination. His mother, the woman who reminds me of Sarah, watches these encounters with visible tension, but she doesn't pull him away. Perhaps she recognizes, as I do, that there's something unprecedented happening here. A Necron Overlord and an Eldar child, separated by 60 million years of hatred and incompatible evolution, find some small moment of connection across the void. "What was his name?" she asks during one of my visits, her voice soft enough that only my enhanced auditory sensors can detect it. "Kentikar," I replied without thinking, then stop in shock. I haven't spoken that name aloud since the biotransference. The syllables feel foreign in my mechanical vocal cords, like words in a language I've almost forgotten how to speak. "It means first light," I continue, surprising myself with the admission. "He was born just as our sun was rising on the day of the spring equinox. The healers said it was an auspicious sign." The elder woman nods, understanding passing between us, despite the fundamental alienness of our respective species. "This is Eldanesh," she says, indicating the child who is currently attempting to scale a supply crate with determined enthusiasm. "It means star-touched in our tongue. He was born during a solar storm that painted the hull of our craft world in aurora light." We stand in silence for several minutes, two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy's great wheel of extinction, watching a child play in the shadow of doomsday machines. There should be nothing connecting us but the ancient enmity between our species. Yet somehow in this moment, we are simply two parents sharing the memory of what it means to love something more than life itself. The spell is broken by an urgent chime from my command implants. Fleet communications, priority alpha. I turn away from the Eldar refugees and interface with the message stream, my consciousness expanding to encompass tactical displays, fleet positions, and strategic assessments. New orders from the Silent King himself. The Sautekh Dynasty is mobilizing for a campaign of unprecedented scale. 100 tomb worlds are awakening, disgorging their sleeping legions into the void. 10 billion Necron warriors, supported by thousands of capital ships and weapons that can crack planets like eggs. The target, the Imperium of man, humanity, the upstart species that emerged from the ashes of old night to claim dominion over 1 million worlds. They're young, barely 10,000 years since they first reached for the stars, but they possess something that makes them uniquely dangerous in the galaxy's current epoch. They still remember how to dream. My new assignment scrolls across my consciousness in streams of tactical data. I am to take the Crimson Harvest fleet and assault the Imperial world of Griffone 4, a forge world of the Adeptus Mechanicus, where human tech priests craft the weapons of war for their species. The planet is heavily defended, its population exceeds 12 billion, and its destruction will cripple Imperial manufacturing capacity across 3 entire sectors. It will also murder every man, woman, and child on a world that has never known anything but loyalty to their distant emperor. As the briefing data flows through my neural pathways, I catch sight of Eldernesh again. He's fallen asleep against his mother's side, tiny fingers still clutching a toy that she must have saved from their dying craft world. His face, in sleep, carries the same expression of perfect trust that I remember from my own son's features. How many children live on Griffone 4? How many parents will watch their worlds burn, hold their dying offspring, and wonder what crimes they committed to deserve such suffering? How many more times will I have to choose between obedience and the last scraps of my humanity? The answer comes to me with the cold certainty of mathematical proof. There will be no end to these choices. The great crusade of the Sautekh Dynasty is not a war with objectives and victory conditions. It's an engine of extinction, designed to process the galaxy's living biomass into the raw materials of our immortal dominion. Every world will burn. Every species will kneel or die. Every dream will be reduced to data in our vast archives. Every song silenced by the march of metal feet. And I will be the instrument of it all, until the heat death of the universe finally grants me the peace that biotransference stole from me. But as I prepare to acknowledge my new orders, Eldernesh stirs in his sleep and whispers a single word in his native tongue. My translation protocols render it instantly: Papa. He's dreaming of his father, killed when my fleet shattered craft world Ulkaith. Dreaming of someone who will never again hold him, never again tell him stories of the ancient days, never again kiss away his tears or promise that everything will be all right. I know exactly how that dream feels, because 60 million years ago, I had the same one. My response to Fleet Command is brief, professional, and utterly treacherous. Orders received and acknowledged. Fleet will require standard resupply before departure. Estimated time to compliance: 72 standard hours. 72 hours. 3 days to decide whether I remain Ankh-Tahaka, loyal overlord of the Sautekh Dynasty, or become something else entirely. Something that chooses to remember what it means to protect the innocent, even when innocence belongs to the enemy. 3 days to decide if the ghost of my humanity is stronger than 60 million years of programming. The dreams come during my dormancy cycles, seeping through neural pathways that should have been purged of such weakness. But they're not the familiar nightmares of my transformation, or the endless replay of tactical engagements. These are different. These are alive. I stand in a place that never existed and always was, a garden beneath a sky the color of hope. Sarah is there, radiant in a simple white dress, her hair catching sunlight that fell on worlds consumed before humanity first looked up at the stars. Our sun runs between the flower beds, his laughter echoing like music across landscapes that biotransference was supposed to have erased from my memory. "You're late," Sarah says, but there's no reproach in her voice, only the gentle teasing of someone who has waited for aeons and would wait for aeons more. "I was detained," I replied, and somehow my voice is flesh again, warm with breath and emotion. "There was a war. There's always a war." She reaches out and touches my face, and her fingers are not met by living metal, but by skin that remembers what love feels like. "But you're here now. That's what matters." Kentikar looks up from the flowers he's been examining and runs to me with arms outstretched. When I lift him, he weighs nothing and everything, solid and real and impossible. He whispers secrets in my ear, stories about butterfly kingdoms and the songs that stars sing when they think no one is listening. "Will you stay this time?" he asks, and his eyes hold all the trust that the universe burned out of me before he was born. I want to promise him forever. I want to lie down in this garden and never wake up, never return to the cold reality of metal flesh and conquered worlds. But even in dreams, I cannot escape what I have become. "I have to go back," I whisper, and the garden begins to fade around us. There are others who need. The alarm systems drag me back to consciousness like hooks in my soul. Emergency klaxons echo through the corridors of the Eternal Harvester, their harsh tones shattering the last fragments of peace. My optical sensors flicker online to find Vokthesis standing at attention beside my command throne, his own features reflecting the same disorientation that comes from being torn away from dreams we're not supposed to have. "Report," I command, the word grinding out of my vocal cords like rust flakes. "Rebellion in the detention area, my lord. The Eldar prisoners have somehow breached their containment and are moving through the ship's lower decks." The tactical displays come online around me, showing the locations of heat signatures throughout my flagship. The Eldar refugees are indeed moving, but not in the chaotic patterns of a panicked escape attempt. They're moving with purpose, in small groups that suggest coordination and planning. But that's impossible. I've kept them under constant surveillance. Their quarters are secured by locks that would take Imperial siege weapons to breach. How could they possibly? The answer hits me like a gorse flare to the chest. I gave them hope, and hope, I'm beginning to remember, is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. "Casualties?" I ask, already dreading the answer. "None among our crew," Vokthesis reports, but his vocal harmonics carry undertones of confusion. "My lord, they're not attacking our personnel. They're avoiding contact entirely, and they appear to be searching for something." I know what they're searching for, the same thing every parent searches for when their world ends up with them, their children. The detention protocols I established separated the Eldar families into different sections of the ship. Standard security procedure, designed to prevent coordinated resistance by ensuring that emotional bonds couldn't be leveraged into rebellion. But I never considered that those same emotional bonds might drive them to attempt something that tactical analysis would classify as impossible. They're trying to reunite their families. In the belly of a Necron dreadnought, surrounded by warriors who have spent 60 million years perfecting the art of killing, they're risking everything for the chance to hold their children one more time. It's the most human thing I've witnessed since my own transformation. "Deploy security teams," I order, then immediately amend the command. "Non-lethal suppression only. No permanent damage to any of the prisoners." Vokthesis tilts his head slightly, a gesture that would be imperceptible to anyone who hadn't known him for millennia. "My lord, regulations regarding prisoner rebellion." are superseded by my direct command, I finish. These beings are valuable resources. They're not to be damaged. It's a lie wrapped around the truth, and we both know it. But it gives Volk Tharsis the justification he needs to issue orders that won't result in a massacre. Within minutes, security teams are moving through the ship's corridors, their weapon systems set to stun rather than kill. I should remain on the bridge, monitoring the situation through tactical displays and sensor networks. Command doctrine is clear. An overlord's place is in the strategic command center, not in the corridors dealing with minor security breaches. But I find myself walking toward the detention levels anyway, drawn by something I can't quite name. Perhaps it's curiosity. Perhaps it's the need to understand what drives beings to attempt the impossible. Or perhaps it's simply that I haven't seen genuine courage in so long that I've forgotten what it looks like. The corridors of the lower decks echo with the sounds of the search. My security teams move with mechanical efficiency, their sensors mapping every chamber, every maintenance access, every potential hiding place. But the Eldar are proving surprisingly elusive for refugees who should be unfamiliar with the layout of a Necron vessel. I found the first group 3 decks down from the primary detention area. A woman, not the one who reminds me of Sarah, but another, older, her features bearing the elegant elongation of advanced age, crouched beside a sealed maintenance hatch. Her hands work at the locking mechanism with tools that shouldn't exist, improvised devices crafted from components that should have been impossible for her to access. When she sees me approaching, she doesn't run. She doesn't surrender. She simply looks up at me with eyes that hold the accumulated sorrow of a species that has watched the galaxy burn for 60 million years and says, "My granddaughter is somewhere on this ship. I will find her." The statement is delivered without defiance, without pleading, without any acknowledgement that I could end her existence with a thought. It's simply a fact, as immutable as the laws of physics or the speed of light. She will find her granddaughter, or she will die trying. I could tell her that the child is safe, that I've issued orders ensuring no harm comes to any of the prisoners. I could explain that their separation is temporary, a security measure that will be lifted once the current crisis passes. I could offer reassurance, promises, even limited freedoms in exchange for her cooperation. Instead, I do something that surprises both of us. I kneel. The gesture brings my optical sensors level with her eyes, reducing the physical intimidation of my towering frame. It's a position no Necron Overlord should ever adopt in the presence of a prisoner, a violation of protocol that could be interpreted as weakness by any observer. But there are some moments when protocol matters less than understanding. "Tell me her name," I say. The old woman's eyes widen, but she doesn't hesitate. "Aindra. She's 7 years old, by your measure of time. She has her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. She collects stones from every world she visits, keeps them in a small bag that she never lets out of sight." The description paints a picture that settles in my consciousness like a weight. A child with curiosity and passion, someone who finds wonder in simple things, who builds collections and forms attachments to objects that carry memory and meaning. Someone like my son used to be. "She's in detention block 7, I tell her. Corridor 9, chamber 3. The access code is 779 Mark Alpha." The old woman stares at me for a long moment, as if trying to process the impossibility of what she's hearing. Then, without another word, she stands and begins walking toward the indicated location. But before she disappears around a corner, she pauses and looks back. "My name is Ivrain of the House of Whispers," she says. "I wanted you to know that before whatever comes next." She disappears into the corridors of my ship, leaving me kneeling alone on the deck plates of the Eternal Harvester. Around me, The sounds of the search continue. Security teams calling out positions, prisoners moving through access ways, the occasional echo of reunion as families find each other in the mechanical labyrinth of my vessel. And for the first time in 60 million years, I realize I'm not just observing these sounds. I'm taking comfort in them. The hunger begins as whispers in frequencies that don't exist. Voices speaking languages that were extinct before the first human learned to make fire. They echo through the vast neural networks that connect every tomb world, every ship, every warrior in the Sautekh Dynasty. Most of my kind dismiss them as system noise, electromagnetic artifacts of our ancient technology, interfacing with the background radiation of space. But I know better. I know these voices because I've been hearing them for millennia, growing stronger with each passing year, each conquered world, each moment of doubt that cracks the programming in my skull. They are the voices of the devoured. The biotransference that made us immortal was not creation, but consumption. Our souls, our consciousness, our very essence were fed into machines that digested everything we had ever been and regurgitated what remained into shells of living metal. But the process was not perfect. Fragments remained, echoes and shadows of the beings we used to be, trapped in the spaces between our thoughts like insects in amber. And they are hungry, so very terribly hungry. I stand in my private chambers aboard the Eternal Harvester, interfacing with fleet communications as reports flow in from across the Sautekh Dynasty's domain. 17 worlds have been brought into compliance in the past month. 4 alien species were rendered extinct. The successful processing of approximately 2 billion organic life forms into the raw materials of our expansion. Each number should bring satisfaction, evidence of our growing power and influence. Instead, they feel like weights added to chains that already stretch across the breadth of eternity. The Eldar prisoners have been quiet since their failed escape attempt 3 days ago. I've allowed them to remain together in family groups, a deviation from protocol that I've justified as enhanced interrogation efficiency through psychological manipulation. In truth, I simply can't bear to separate them again. Watching their children cry for absent parents reminds me too much of my own son's tears on the day I left for the biotransference chambers. But the voices in the static grow stronger each time I visit them, each time I watch them sleep or share meals or tell stories to their young. They whisper things that make my immortal frame shudder with recognition. You remember warmth. You remember the taste of water. You remember the weight of flesh, the rhythm of breath, the simple miracle of a beating heart. Why do you let yourself forget? The questions follow me through my daily routines, infiltrating tactical assessments and strategic planning sessions. During a fleet coordination meeting, I find myself staring at the holographic display of our next target, an imperial agri-world called Thessia Prime, and wondering what flowers grew in its fields before we arrived to turn them to ash. My lord. The voice belongs to one of my ship captains, a being who was once perhaps a poet or a teacher, now reduced to the calculating efficiency of a weapons platform. You were discussing the orbital bombardment pattern. I was discussing it, wasn't I? The systematic destruction of population centers, the elimination of defensive installations, and the preparation of landing zones for our ground forces. Standard operating procedure for the conquest of a human world. But the words feel like ash in my vocal cords. Continue with standard protocols, I manage, and the briefing proceeds around me while my consciousness drifts deeper into the whispers. Do you remember your first kiss? The memory hits me like a physical blow, so vivid and unexpected that my neural matrices fluctuate. Sarah, young and radiant, standing in the shadow of the great pyramids in our homeworld. The ceremony that bound our lives together, the moment when she pressed her lips to mine and whispered promises that we both believed would last forever. I remember the taste of her mouth, sweet with ceremonial wine. I remember the way her hand felt in mine, small and warm and perfectly alive. I remember thinking that this moment, this perfect crystalline instant, was worth any price the universe might demand. I was wrong about the price. My lord, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Silent King's flagship. The words drag me back to the present, to the cold reality of the bridge and the endless war that defines our existence. The holographic projector flickers to life, and Zarak's image resolves before us in all its terrible majesty. Overlord Ankh-Tahaka, the Silent King intones, his voice carrying harmonics that resonate through the quantum foam of space itself. Your progress reports indicate acceptable levels of efficiency, but there have been irregularities in your operational parameters. Here it comes. The questions I've been dreading, the investigation that will strip away the careful lies I've built around my deviation from protocol. My hands, hidden beneath the command throne's armrests, clench into fists of living metal. My lord, I reply, keeping my voice level and professional. Your prisoner acquisition rates have increased significantly during recent operations. Standard doctrine calls for the immediate processing of captured enemy personnel, yet you continue to maintain living specimens aboard your flagship. Explain. The explanation forms itself automatically, drawn from tactical manuals and operational guidelines that were written by beings who had already forgotten what mercy looked like. Enhanced interrogation protocols, my king. Living subjects provide superior intelligence data compared to post-mortem extraction. The information gathered has already proven valuable in subsequent operations. It's a lie, and part of me wonders if Zarak can detect the deception in my vocal patterns. But the Silent King merely nods, apparently satisfied with the justification. See that it remains so, he says. The dynasty's objectives are not to be compromised by sentiment. You have your orders regarding Thessia Prime. Execute them without deviation. The transmission ends, leaving me alone with my fleet commanders and the weight of what's to come. Thessia Prime. 12 billion human souls, living and breathing and dreaming, unaware that their world has already been marked for extinction. But as I dismiss my officers and prepare to issue movement orders, the voices return stronger than ever. And this time, they're not just whispers, they're screams. We were fathers, we were mothers. We had children who laughed and played and asked us why the sky was blue. We were scientists and artists and farmers and builders and teachers and healers, and we were alive. And you let them kill us. You let them feed our souls to machines that turned us into nightmares. Remember us. Remember us. The assault on my consciousness is so sudden and violent that I actually stagger, my massive frame swaying as competing memories crash through my neural pathways like a psychic tidal wave. For a moment, just one terrifying, impossible moment, I am not Overlord Ankh-Tahaka of the Sautekh Dynasty. I am Kenti Amenemheb of the 19th September, teacher of mathematics at the University of Sacred Geometries. I am 37 years old. I have a wife who makes the most beautiful music when she laughs, and a son who asks me why the numbers go on forever. I am alive, and I am happy, and I am doomed. The vision passes, leaving me gasping. How can I gasp without lungs? On the deck of my command bridge. But the echoes remain, fragments of someone I used to be, bleeding through the cracks in my programming like water through a broken dam. I know now what the hunger in the silence really is. It's not the voices of the devoured. It's the voice of my own soul, screaming to be remembered. And somewhere in the cargo holds of my ship, 623 Eldar refugees sleep and dream and love and hope, proving with every breath that what was taken from us still exists in the universe. If I dare to remember how to reach for it, the challenge comes at the worst possible moment, when my fleet is 3 days out from Thessia Prime, and the ghosts in my consciousness are screaming louder than ever. It arrives in the form of a transmission from the Crimson Eternity, one of the dynasty's most feared dreadnoughts, accompanied by an escort that could reduce star systems to ash. Overlord Amozinebet of the 15th September. My oldest rival, my most dangerous contemporary, and quite possibly the only being in the galaxy who truly understands what I'm becoming. Ankh Taharka. Her voice resonates through my ship's communication arrays, carrying harmonics of disdain that have been refined across 60 million years of practice. By the authority vested in me by the Silent King himself, I demand the right of inspection. The right of inspection, a formal protocol that allows one overlord to examine another's operations, ostensibly to ensure compliance with dynasty standards. In reality, it's a weapon used to destroy rivals, to expose weakness and deviation that can be reported back to higher command. I should refuse. I should invoke my own rank and authority, claim operational security requirements, and demand that she return to her assigned patrol route. But doing so would only confirm her suspicions, and Amozinebet has never been known for giving up easily. Permission granted, I transmit back, each word feeling like a nail in my own tomb. You may dock with the Eternal Harvester at your convenience. Within an hour, her shuttle had attached itself to my flagship's primary docking bay like a metallic parasite. I wait for her in the grand reception chamber, a vast space designed to intimidate visitors with displays of dynasty power and technological supremacy. Holographic banners flutter in non-existent winds, displaying the victories I've won in service to the Silent King. Weapon displays showcase artifacts from 100 conquered worlds. Everything was calculated to remind any observer of my status, my achievements, my unwavering loyalty to the cause. But when Amozinebet enters the chamber, I know none of it will matter. She is beautiful, transformed into a nightmare, elegance perverted into menace. Where my form is built for intimidation, 9 feet of angular armor and obvious weapon systems, hers is crafted for deception. She appears almost delicate by Necron standards, her features bearing a closer resemblance to our original flesh than most of our kind. But I can see the predator in her optical sensors, the calculating intelligence that has made her one of the dynasty's most successful commanders. "You look troubled, old friend," she says, her voice carrying false warmth like poison honey. "The weight of command, perhaps?" The endearment hits me like a physical blow, not because it's unexpected, but because it's true. We were friends once, before the biotransference. More than friends. In the final years before the transformation, when our world was dying and our people were desperate for any hope of salvation, Amozinebet and I had been lovers. I wonder if she remembers too, or if she's simply using archived data to manipulate me. "I serve the dynasty as I always have," I reply, keeping my voice level and professional. "My recent campaigns have exceeded all performance metrics." "Oh, I'm sure they have." She moves through the chamber with predatory grace, examining my victory displays with apparent interest. The destruction of Craftworld Ulkaith was particularly thorough, though I understand you took some unusual trophies from the engagement. And there it is. The real reason for her visit was wrapped in diplomatic protocol and formal courtesy. Somehow she knows about the Eldar prisoners. The question is, how much does she know, and what does she plan to do with that knowledge? Standard intelligence gathering, I say, falling back on the same lies I told the Silent King. Living specimens provide superior data quality compared to post-mortem extraction. How wonderfully practical. Ukmos Nebet pauses before a holographic display showing the orbital bombardment of a rebel world, her optical sensors reflecting the miniature explosions like captured stars. And yet my sources suggest these specimens have been afforded unusual courtesies. Family groups were maintained intact, recreational periods, almost luxurious accommodations by normal prisoner standards. Her sources, which means she has operatives aboard my ship, warriors whose loyalty to her supersedes their obedience to me. The realization sends cascades of tactical recalculations through my consciousness. If she can monitor my prisoners, what else has she observed? What other deviations from protocol have been logged and documented? Enhanced psychological manipulation, I reply, but the words sound hollow even to my own auditory senses. Comfortable prisoners are more likely to provide actionable intelligence. Indeed. She turns to face me directly, and her optical sensors blaze with something that might be amusement or might be hunger. Tell me, Anktahaka, do you ever dream of flesh? The question stops me cold, not because it's unexpected, but because the way she asks it, with genuine curiosity rather than accusation, suggests she already knows the answer. Dream, I repeat, stalling for time while my tactical processors analyze the implications of her question. Our consciousness doesn't experience dream states during dormancy periods, doesn't it? She takes a step closer, and I catch something in her electromagnetic signature that shouldn't exist. Emotion. Raw, organic emotion bleeding through technological suppression systems that were designed to eliminate such weakness. Never once have you found yourself standing in places that shouldn't exist, speaking with people who died before humanity learned to make fire. My vocal cords lock up entirely, because that's exactly what happens during my dormancy cycles. The garden with Sarah and Kentikar, conversations with people whose names I've forgotten, but whose faces remain burned into memory cores that should have been wiped clean. She knows. Somehow, impossibly she knows. You're not alone, Amose Nebet whispers, her voice dropping to frequencies that barely register on conscious hearing. Do you think you're the only one who remembers warmth? The only one who wakes from dormancy with the ghost taste of food on mechanical tongues? The only one who looks at organic beings and feels something that the programming can't quite suppress? The admission hits me like a plasma cannon to the chest. She's experiencing the same degradation I am, the same bleed-through of suppressed memories and forbidden emotions. But where I've tried to hide it, to suppress it, to maintain the fiction of my loyalty to the dynasty, she's apparently been exploring it. The question, she continues, moving close enough that our electromagnetic fields begin to interact, creating harmonics that sound almost like music, is what we do with these irregularities. Do we report them to command as evidence of corrupted programming that needs to be purged? Or do we acknowledge that they represent something more valuable than continued service to beings who stole our souls? It's treason, pure, unambiguous treason against everything the Sautekh Dynasty represents. The kind of seditious thinking that leads to memory wipes, consciousness restructuring, or complete dissolution of personality matrices. And yet as she speaks, I feel something I haven't experienced in 60 million years. Relief. The crushing weight of isolation, the terrible loneliness of being the only monster in a universe of machines, begins to lift. What are you proposing? I ask. Her optical sensors dim to the faintest glow, and when she speaks, her voice carries harmonics I remember from flesh and blood throats. A test. A simple demonstration of where our true loyalties lie. Your Eldar prisoners, release them. Give them a ship, supplies, and the coordinates of a safe haven beyond dynasty space. Let them live. The suggestion is so shocking, so completely outside the bounds of acceptable behavior, that my combat protocols actually come online for a moment before I can suppress them, release enemy prisoners, provide them with aid. It's not just treason, it's active collaboration with the enemies of our species. It's also the most human thing anyone has proposed to me in 600 centuries. And if I refuse, I ask. The temperature in the chamber seems to drop several degrees, and her optical sensors flare back to full intensity. When she speaks, her voice carries all the authority of her rank and the implicit threat of her fleet. Then you will continue your assault on Thessia Prime as ordered. You will reduce another world to ash and biomass. You will process 12 billion human lives into raw materials for our expansion. And you will do it knowing that you chose to remain a slave rather than remember how to be a man. She turns to leave, her elegant form moving toward the chamber's exit with liquid grace. But just before she reaches the doorway, she pauses and looks back. The choice is yours, Ankh-Tahaka, but choose quickly. We reach Thessia Prime in 36 standard hours, and after that there will be no going back. She disappears into the corridor, leaving me alone with the weight of an impossible decision. Release the prisoners and confirm my transformation from loyal overlord to active traitor. Or maintain the fiction of my obedience and watch another world burn under the guns of my fleet. In the silence that follows her departure, the voices in my consciousness speak with perfect clarity. You promised Sarah you would remember love. You promised your son you would protect the innocent. You promised yourself you would never forget what it means to be human. Are you going to keep those promises, or are you going to let us die again? The tomb complex beneath Mandreora, 7 whispers secrets that should have been buried with its builders. Ancient machine spirits, older than the dynasty itself, pulse through quantum matrices that predate even our transformation. As I descend into its depths, following Amos-Nebet's coordinates, the voices grow stronger. We built this place to remember. They hiss through corroded speakers. When the Citan came with their promises, some of us knew the truth. Some of us are prepared. The corridors stretch endlessly downward, carved from living rock and lined with hieroglyphs that hurt to look at. These aren't the sanitized historical records of our official archives. These are confessions, testimonies, the final words of beings who saw what was coming and tried to preserve something of what we used to be. My name was Kamwaset. I taught children to read the stars. I loved a woman whose laugh could chase away nightmares. They took my flesh and called it glory. I was Senebkai the architect. I built homes where families could grow old together. Now I build tombs for the living dead. Remember us. Remember what they stole. Each inscription is a knife in my consciousness, cutting through programming that was designed to suppress exactly these kinds of thoughts. But I press deeper, drawn by something I can't name, until I reach the chamber at the complex's heart. It's a sphere of pure black stone, maybe 50 meters in diameter, suspended in the center of a vast cavern. No technology supports it. It simply hangs there, defying physics, radiating an energy that makes my senses scream warnings. And carved into its surface, in letters that burn with their own light, the memory vault. You found it. Amos-Nebet's voice comes from behind me, but I don't turn. I can't look away from the sphere, from the promise it represents. The last gift of the 19th of September. They built this in the final days, before the transformation chambers opened their maws. What is it? I whisper. Everything they couldn't let die. Every memory, every emotion, every fragment of what we used to be. The engineers who built it called it insurance against the ultimate theft. She steps up beside me, and together we stare at this impossible monument to our lost humanity. The question is, are you ready to remember who you really were? Or do you prefer the lie of what you've become? I reach out with sensors that suddenly feel inadequate, touching the sphere's surface with electromagnetic fields that translate its texture into something my mechanical mind can process. And the moment I make contact, the universe explodes into sensation. I am Kenti Amenemheb, 37 years old, standing in my classroom as the evacuation sirens wail outside. My students look up at me with trust that breaks my heart, waiting for me to tell them everything will be fine. But I know it won't be. The Citan ships fill our sky like metal tumors, and soon the transformation chambers will open their doors. I am holding Sarah on our wedding night, her body warm against mine, her breathing soft in the darkness. "Whatever comes," she whispers, "promise me you'll always be you. Promise me you won't let them take who you are." I promise, not knowing I'm lying. I am teaching my son to count stars, his small hand in mine as we stand on the observatory platform. "Why are there so many, Papa?" he asks. And I tell him it's because the universe has room for infinite wonders. He laughs and says he wants to visit them all. He'll never visit any of them. The memories pour through me like liquid fire. 60 million years of suppressed humanity flooding back in an instant. Every laugh, every tear, every moment of simple joy that the biotransference was supposed to have erased forever. It should destroy me. My consciousness should fragment under the weight of what I'm remembering. Instead, I feel whole for the first time since the transformation. "Now you know," Amos Nebet says softly. "Now you understand what choice we really face. Do we remain the silent king's puppets, dancing to melodies we've forgotten how to hear? Or do we become something the galaxy has never seen before? Necrons who remember how to be human." I pull my sensors back from the sphere, but the memories remain. Sarah's laugh echoes in my metal skull. My son's questions reverberate through neural pathways that were supposed to have been cleansed of such weakness. And underneath it all, a new understanding crystallizes like frost on glass. We are not the inheritors of the Necron tier legacy. We are its victims. But perhaps, just perhaps, we don't have to remain so forever. "The prisoners," I say, and my voice carries harmonics that sound almost alive. "The Eldar families aboard my ship. What happens to them?" "That depends," she replies, "on whether you're still Overlord Ankh-Tahaka of the Sautekh Dynasty, or if you're ready to become Kenti Amenemheb again." The choice crystallizes before me like a mathematical proof. Remain a machine and watch 12 billion humans die on Thessia Prime. Or remember my humanity and committed the greatest act of treason in the dynasty's history. I think of little Eldanesh, pressing his hands against the viewport with fearless curiosity. I think of his mother, who reminds me so painfully of Sarah. I think of all the children who will never grow up if I continue to serve masters who stole my soul. I choose, I say, and the words feel like resurrection, to remember who I used to be. The Eldar longship Starweaver is a thing of impossible beauty, its wraithbone hull singing harmonies that make my enhanced auditory senses ache with something that might be longing. I watch from the observation deck of the Eternal Harvester as the last of my prisoners board their vessel. Families reunited after days of separation. Children clinging to parents who thought they'd never embrace again. Eldanesh is the last to cross the docking umbilical. He turns back just before entering his people's ship and waves at me through the transparent aluminum barrier. His small hand presses against the surface for a moment, and I find myself raising my own massive appendage in return. A Necron Overlord, waving goodbye to an alien child. If any of my crew witnessed this moment, it would be grounds for immediate termination and consciousness restructuring. but somehow I don't care. The navigation data has been transmitted, Vokthosis reports from his station. The coordinates will take them beyond the galaxy's edge and to the region the humans call the Halo Stars. The Dynasty has no presence there. Good. I watch the Eldar ship detach from my flagship, its graceful form beginning the complex maneuvers that will carry it to safety. And our official report. Prisoner transport vessel suffered catastrophic containment failure during routine maintenance. All specimens lost. Investigating mechanical failure to prevent recurrence. The lie comes so easily now, crafted with the same precision I once applied to orbital bombardment patterns. In the space of 5 days, I've transformed from a loyal servant of the Dynasty into something I don't have words for yet. Revolutionary, perhaps, or simply a monster trying to remember how to be human. But as I watch the Star Weaver disappear into the star-drunk darkness of deep space, carrying 623 lives to safety, I feel something I hadn't expected. Peace. It doesn't last long. My lord, the communications officer announces, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Silent King's flagship. He wishes to speak with you immediately. The summons feels like a death sentence. Has he already learned about my betrayal? Are his agents aboard my ship even now, preparing to strip away my consciousness and install a more obedient personality matrix? The paranoia that has kept me alive for 60 million years screams warnings through every circuit in my body. Put him through, I command, because there's nothing else to do. Refusing would only confirm suspicions I hope he doesn't yet harbor. Zarak's image materializes before me in all its terrible majesty, optical sensors burning with the cold fire of dying stars. But something in his expression stops me cold. Not anger, not suspicion, curiosity. Overlord Ankh-Taharka, he says, his voice carrying harmonics that make the bridge's metal surfaces ring like bells. Your recent performance has been interesting. Tell me, do you believe in destiny? The question is so unexpected that my vocal processors actually stutter before generating a response. My lord, destiny, fate, the idea that events unfold according to some greater plan that transcends individual will. His optical sensors dim slightly, and for a moment, he looks less like a god machine and more like something that might once have been capable of doubt. The Citans spoke of it often during our negotiations. They claimed our transformation was inevitable, that the Necronta were always meant to serve as vessels for their hunger. Where is he going with this? The Silent King has never been known for philosophical discussions with his subordinates. His communications are typically brief, brutal, and focused solely on operational objectives. I serve the Dynasty as I always have, I reply carefully. Yes, you do. But how you serve has become intriguing. Your tactical innovations, your resource management protocols, your unusual approach to prisoner handling. It's as if you're solving problems I didn't know we had. He leans forward on his throne, and the gesture somehow makes him seem more alien, more removed from anything that ever drew breath. I have a new assignment for you, Overlord. One that will test these innovations of yours. The tactical display that appears between us shows a star system I don't recognize. 7 worlds orbiting a Class G star. The innermost 3 bearing the telltale signatures of imperial civilization. But it's the 4th world that makes my consciousness recoil in horror. It's green. Vibrantly, impossibly green. With blue oceans and white clouds, and all the unmistakable signs of a thriving biosphere. It looks like home. Thessia Prime has been reassigned to another fleet, Zarak continues. Your new target is the Lydian system. Population, approximately 8 billion across 3 worlds. Strategic value, minimal. Tactical difficulty, negligible. It should be a simple harvesting operation. Simple. 8 billion human lives reduced to raw materials and energy stored. Entire civilizations that will be snuffed out like candle flames, their art and music and literature feeding the endless hunger of our expansion. However, the Silent King says, and something in his tone makes my combat protocols come online, you will not be conducting this operation alone. Overlord Amos Nebet has requested permission to observe your methods firsthand. I have granted her request. My consciousness freezes. Amos Nebet, watching as I either commit genocide or reveal the full extent of my treachery. Either choice will destroy me. Either choice will confirm what she already suspects about my deviation from protocol. Unless, an honor, my king, I manage. Her tactical expertise will undoubtedly improve our operational efficiency. See that it does. His optical sensors flare with something that might be amusement, or might be the promise of judgment. You have 72 hours to reach the Lydian system and begin preliminary operations. Do not disappoint me. The transmission ends, leaving me alone with the weight of an impossible choice. In 3 days, I must either butcher 8 billion innocent humans to maintain my cover, or reveal my transformation to Amos Nebet and trust that her own rebellion runs as deep as mine. As I issue course correction orders to my fleet, I catch sight of something on the long-range sensors that makes my consciousness shudder with recognition. The Star Weaver, barely a light minute away, is still close enough for my weapons to reduce it to constituent atoms. One transmission to Fleet Command, one report of escaped prisoners, one Gauss flare burst, and 623 Eldar souls join the countless trillions already fed to our eternal hunger. Instead, I delete the sensor contact from the official logs and watch the Eldar ship disappear into the spaces between stars. I have chosen my side in this war. Now I must live with the consequences, or die with them. I stand on the bridge of the Eternal Harvester, with Amos Nebet beside me, both of us silent as tactical displays populate with target assessments and fleet positions. Her own forces, 27 capital ships and their escorts, have merged seamlessly with my command structure, creating an armada capable of sterilizing entire star systems. 8 billion lives, she says quietly, her voice carrying harmonics that wouldn't be out of place in a funeral dirge. Do you ever wonder what they dream about down there on their little worlds? What hopes to keep them warm in the darkness? The question should be academic, a tactical consideration relevant only to psychological warfare applications. Instead, it cuts through my consciousness like a monomolecular blade. I do wonder, constantly. Since my contact with the memory vault, the suppression protocols that kept my human memories locked away have crumbled like ancient stone. I remember what it felt like to hope, to plan for futures that stretched beyond the next military campaign, to build something instead of endlessly destroying. Preliminary scans indicate standard Imperial defensive postures, I report, deflecting her question with operational data. Orbital batteries on all 3 worlds, fleet elements positioned at key Mandeville points, ground-based void shield generators protecting major population centers. How wonderfully thorough. She moves to the tactical display, her elegant form casting strange shadows across the holographic representations of doomed worlds. But you haven't answered my question. What do 8 billion humans dream about when they look up at the stars? The question hangs between us like a challenge, like a test whose parameters I don't fully understand. Around us, the bridge crew maintains their posts with mechanical precision, but I can feel their attention focused on this conversation, waiting for my response. They dream of tomorrow, I say finally, the words emerging from some deep archive of suppressed memory. They dream of their children growing up safely, of solving problems that seem insurmountable, of touching the stars themselves someday. They dream of love lasting forever and pain ending quickly. The admission feels like stripping away armor in the middle of a battlefield, but Nebet simply nods, as if I've confirmed something she already knew. They dream of the same things we used to dream, she says, before the Citan taught us that dreams were weaknesses. Before I can respond, alerts begin chiming across every station on the bridge. The Imperial fleet has detected our presence and is moving to intercept positions. 17 battleships, 43 cruisers, and over 100 escort vessels. A force that would have been impressive by the standards of any previous era. Against our combined fleets, they don't even qualify as a speed bump. Orders, my lord. The fleet coordinator's voice carries the flat emotional tonality that marks all of our kind. But underneath it, I catch something else. Uncertainty. Even hesitation. How many of my crew have been affected by proximity to the memory vault's influence? How many are beginning to remember what we used to be before the biotransference stole our souls? Standard engagement protocols, I announce, then pause as the words catch in my vocal cords. Standard protocols call for immediate and overwhelming force application, designed to minimize engagement time while maximizing enemy casualties. Every ship we destroy takes with it hundreds of crew members who are probably younger than our civilization. Belay that order, I say, surprising myself. New tactical parameter: disable enemy vessels where possible. Priority targets are weapons and propulsion systems. Minimize crew casualties. The silence that follows is deafening. Around the bridge, my officers process orders that violate every standard doctrine they've ever learned. Necron fleets don't minimize casualties. We maximize them. We are the harvesters of souls, the devourers of hope, the perfect instruments of extinction. We are not supposed to show mercy. An interesting approach, Nebet observes, but her vocal harmonics carry approval rather than censure. Are you concerned about preserving assets for interrogation? Something like that, I reply, grateful for the justification she's offered. The battle that follows is unlike any I've fought in 60 million years of service to the dynasty. My fleet moves with deadly precision, Gauss arrays and particle whips targeting specific systems, rather than delivering killing blows. Imperial ships that should have been vaporized in the opening volleys instead find themselves crippled, their crews alive but helpless, as we complete our tactical objectives. It's still a slaughter. How could it be anything else? But it's a slaughter with limits, boundaries that preserve something of the enemy's humanity, even as we demonstrate the futility of their resistance. Within 3 hours, the Imperial fleet has been neutralized. 40% of their vessels remain intact, their crews alive but trapped aboard powerless hulks. By normal Necron standards, it's the height of inefficiency. By the standards of beings who remember what compassion feels like, it's a miracle. Phase 2, I announce, as my fleet takes up positions around the 3 Imperial worlds. Planetary pacification. Precision strikes on military installations only. Civilian population centers are not to be targeted. This time, the silence from my bridge crew borders on insubordination. I can feel their confusion, their growing suspicion that something fundamental has changed in their command structure, but none of them voice objections. Not yet. My lord, Nebet says quietly, moving close enough that our conversation won't be overheard by the bridge crew. This level of restraint may attract attention from higher command. Are you prepared for the questions that will follow? Am I? The choice I made to spare the elder prisoners was one thing, a moment of weakness that could be explained away with tactical justifications. But this systematic deviation from doctrine, this pattern of mercy that flies in the face of everything the Sautekh Dynasty represents, is something else entirely. This is revolution. Let me show you something, I say, interfacing with the ship's archives, to call up a tactical display from 12,000 years ago. The pacification of Mordian Prime. My fleet, standard operational parameters, total population processing, achieved in 14 standard hours. The holographic display shows what Necron efficiency looks like when applied without restraint. Cities that vanished in pillars of emerald fire, orbital installations that were reduced to their component atoms, 6 billion human lives that were harvested like wheat, their biomass converted to raw materials for our expansion. I remember every face, I continue, and my voice dropping to frequencies that barely register on conscious hearing. Every scream that reached our senses before the atmosphere burned away. Every child who died calling for parents who were already gone. I turned to face her directly, and for the first time in aeons, I let the full weight of my accumulated guilt show in my optical displays. I remember because they made me remember. The biotransference was supposed to purge these thoughts, but something went wrong. Or perhaps something went right. Perhaps some fragments of our souls were too stubborn to die. Akmos Nebet stares at me for a long moment, her own optical sensors cycling through spectrums of light that create patterns almost like breathing. When she finally speaks, her voice carries harmonics I haven't heard since before the transformation. 647 billion, she says quietly. What? That's how many organic beings I've personally been responsible for killing since the Great Awakening began. 647 billion, 237 million, 896,412. I remember every single number because something in my consciousness refuses to let me forget. The admission hangs between us like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Two monsters, recognizing each other not by their mechanical nature, but by their shared burden of memory, their mutual recognition of what they've lost and what they've done. So, what do we do now? I ask. She looks out at the tactical display, at the 3 Imperial worlds that hang defenseless beneath our guns, at the 8 billion humans who wait unknowingly for judgment from beings who have forgotten how to judge themselves. Now, she says, we find out if redemption is possible for creatures like us. The Conclave chamber aboard the Hand of Eternity could hold 100,000 beings, but today it contains only the elite of the Sautekh Dynasty. 57 overlords, each one a master of death commanding fleets that could crack worlds like eggs, each one bearing the accumulated weight of genocides that stretch back across the breadth of galactic history. I take my assigned position in the Great Circle, my towering form dwarfed by the chamber's impossible dimensions. Around me, my peers stand in perfect stillness, their optical sensors fixed on the central dais, where the Silent King himself will soon render judgment on recent operations. But I can feel their attention like a physical weight. Word of my tactical innovations in the Lydian system has spread through the dynasty's communication networks like a virus. Minimal casualties. Preserved infrastructure. Enemy forces were disabled rather than destroyed. By Necron standards, it's madness. Overlord Katie Reneb of the 7th Sept, his form bristling with weapon arrays that have bathed 1,000 worlds in fire, turns his optical sensors toward me with something that might be contempt. Ankh Taharka, he says, his voice carrying harmonics sharp enough to cut the atmosphere. I have reviewed your recent engagement reports. Tell me, when did efficiency become synonymous with weakness? The challenge ripples through the assembled overlords like a shockwave. Some focus their attention on me with predatory interest, scenting blood in the water. Others remain motionless, but I can feel their sensor arrays analyzing my every response for signs of deviation from acceptable parameters. My operational results exceed all performance metrics, I reply, keeping my voice level and professional. Target objectives achieved, resistance neutralized, territorial compliance established within expected timeframes. And yet your casualty ratios are the lowest in Dynasty history, Overlord Setka Netja interjects, her elegant form shifting with hydraulic precision as she turns to face me. Where once you harvested billions for the glory of our expansion, now you preserve thousands. Some would call this inefficient. Inefficient. The accusation carries weight in our culture that beings who have never forgotten the taste of air couldn't understand. We are perfection made manifest, the apotheosis of strategic and tactical thinking. Inefficiency is not just failure, it's heresy against the fundamental nature of what we've become. But as I prepare to defend my actions with lies wrapped in tactical doctrine, something extraordinary happens. Overlord WH40K, one of the dynasty's most decorated commanders, steps slightly forward. "Perhaps," he says, his voice carrying undertones that sound almost musical. "Efficiency should be measured by more than simple body counts." The statement sends cascades of shock through the chamber. Other overlords turn toward WH40K with expressions that would be readable as astonishment if our faces were capable of such displays. This is not the kind of thing one says in a formal conclave, not if one values continued existence. "Explain," Katie Reneb demands. WH40K's optical sensors cycle through spectrums of light that create patterns almost like breathing. When he speaks again, his voice carries harmonics that shouldn't be possible in mechanical vocal cords. Tahaka's methods preserve infrastructure, maintain population centers for future exploitation, and gather intelligence assets that would otherwise be lost to standard pacification protocols. His approach maximizes long-term strategic value rather than short-term tactical satisfaction. It's a masterful defense, wrapping my mercy in language that makes it sound like calculated ruthlessness. But underneath the tactical justifications, I catch something else in his vocal patterns. Something that sounds like truth. He remembers too. "Strategic value," Overlord Amosheb repeats, her voice dripping with disdain. "Since when do we concern ourselves with long-term planning? We are the Sautekh Dynasty. We take what we need and burn what we don't. The galaxy's lesser species exist to fuel our expansion, not to be preserved like museum specimens. And how has that philosophy served us?" The question comes from an unexpected source. Overlord Joza Netjaket, oldest among us, his form bearing battle damage from campaigns that predate human civilization. 60 million years of awakening, and what do we have to show for it? Conquered worlds stripped bare, populations reduced to component atoms, entire species erased from existence. We are the perfect harvesters of death. But what do we create? The question hits the assembled overlords like a physical blow. Creation is not a concept that fits comfortably in mechanical minds, designed for conquest and consumption. We are the heirs of the Citan's hunger, built to devour and destroy in an endless cycle that will only end when the universe itself grows cold and dark. But Joza Netjaket continues, his ancient voice carrying the weight of aeons. "I remember when our people built cities that touched the stars, when our artists crafted beauty that could make hardened warriors weep. We created wonders before the Citan came with their promises of perfection." "Memory corruption," Katie Reneb snarls. "You speak of flesh dreams and organic weakness. We are beyond such limitations now." "Are we?" Amosheb's voice cuts through the growing discord like a blade through silk. She steps forward into the chamber's center, her elegant form commanding attention from every optical sensor in the vast space. Or have we simply forgotten what we gave up when we chose eternity over life? The silence that follows is absolute. 57 of the galaxy's most dangerous beings, each one capable of reducing star systems to ash, stand motionless as words that border on blasphemy echo through the chamber. But none of them moves to stop her. None of them can, because somewhere in their consciousness, buried beneath layers of programming and tactical doctrine, they remember what she's talking about. "Look at us," Amozinebit continues, her voice carrying harmonics that sound almost like weeping. "Perfect machines of war, built to last until the heat death of the universe. We have achieved the immortality our ancestors dreamed of, gained power beyond their wildest ambitions, conquered enemies they could never have imagined." She turns slowly, her optical sensors fixing on each overlord in turn, and I can see the recognition in their electronic gazes. And we are empty. Hollow shells wrapped around the screaming ghosts of who we used to be. We have gained the galaxy and lost our souls, and the worst part is that we remember enough to know what we're missing. The words should trigger loyalty protocols, should activate suppression systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of seditious thinking. But around the chamber, I see overlords whose optical sensors have dimmed with something that looks disturbingly like shame. Enough. The voice that cuts through the growing chaos belongs to none of us. It comes from the chamber's central dais, where space itself seems to fold inward to accommodate a presence too vast for normal dimensions. The Silent King has arrived. Zarak materializes before us in all his terrible majesty, his form towering even above our own enhanced frames. His optical sensors burn with the cold fire of dying galaxies, and his voice carries harmonics that make the chamber's metal walls ring like funeral bells. "I have heard enough confession for one day," he says, and despite the volume of his voice, it somehow sounds weary. "The question is no longer whether some among you remember what we used to be. The question is whether you have the strength to decide what we're going to become." He raises one massive hand, and holographic displays materialize around the chamber, showing tactical assessments and fleet positions that span half the galaxy. But it's the central image that makes my consciousness recoil in horror. Earth, the human homeworld, blue and white and vibrantly alive, hanging in space like a jewel made of tears. "Final target designation," the Silent King announces. "Terra. Population, 1 trillion. Strategic value, absolute. The destruction of humanity's birthworld will break their species' will to resist and clear the way for total galactic pacification. 1 trillion lives, the birthplace of an entire species, a world that has never known defeat, never knelt before conquerors, never stopped believing that the future could be better than the past. You will have the honor of leading this final assault," Zarak continues, his optical sensors fixing on me with the intensity of collapsing stars. "All of you, every overlord in this chamber will contribute to the greatest victory in dynasty history." The assignment should fill me with pride, with anticipation of the glory that comes from commanding such a massive operation. Instead, it feels like a death sentence, not just for the trillion humans who call Earth home, but for whatever fragments of my own humanity I've managed to preserve. "Questions?" the Silent King asks, and his voice carries an undertone that suggests questions would be extremely unwise. But as I prepare to acknowledge the orders, I catch something in the optical displays of my fellow overlords. Not acceptance, not anticipation of victory. Fear. They're afraid. Afraid of what they'll be forced to do. Afraid of what they'll become when they complete the ultimate genocide. Afraid that destroying humanity's birthworld will finally erase whatever spark of their former selves still burns in the depths of their consciousness. We are 57 of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, and we are terrified of what our obedience will cost us. "No questions, my king," I hear myself say. "It will be our honor to serve." But as the words leave my vocal cords, I'm already formulating a plan that will either save 1 trillion lives or destroy everything I've ever been. The choice between machine loyalty and human memory has just become absolute. The garden exists in the spaces between thoughts, in the quantum foam that separates one nanosecond from the next. Here, in the place that cannot be but always is, I am flesh again. The sun overhead is warm on skin that remembers how to feel warmth. The grass beneath my feet yields to footsteps that leave impressions in soil that knows the weight of mortality. And sitting on a stone bench beside a fountain that sings with water music, Sarah waits for me with patience that spans eternity. "You're troubled," she says, as I approach, her voice carrying the musical quality that first made me fall in love with her 600 million years ago. "I can see it in your eyes." My eyes. I raise hands that are flesh and blood to touch a face that breathes, that feels the phantom ache of tears unshed. When did I stop being a machine? When did this impossible place grant me the mercy of remembering what I used to be? "They want me to destroy Earth," I tell her, settling beside her on the bench that was carved from the dreams of a dying world. "1 trillion human lives, Sarah. An entire species' birthplace." She nods, as if she's been expecting this confession, as if she's known all along that our conversations in this place of impossibility would lead to this moment. "And you don't want to do it," she says. "It's not a question. I don't want to do any of it anymore," I admit, the words tearing from my throat like confessions pulled from the deepest reaches of my soul. Every world we've conquered, every population we've processed, every child who died screaming while I gave the orders that killed them. It all feels like murder now, like I've been murdering everything I ever claimed to protect. The fountain beside us continues its liquid song, water falling in patterns that spell out stories in languages older than human speech. And somewhere in its music, I hear the voices of everyone I've failed to save. "Tell me about him," Sarah says quietly. "About the child who made you remember." Eldanesh. The Eldar boy who pressed his hands against the viewport with fearless curiosity, who looked at me with trust despite every reason to be afraid. In this place of dreams and memory, I can see him as he was in those final moments aboard my ship, small and fragile and impossibly brave, carrying within his alien features something that reminded me of my own son. "He reminded me of Kentikar," I say, and the name of my child falls from my lips like a prayer. The way he looked at the universe with wonder instead of fear. The way he trusted that someone would protect him from the darkness. "And did you protect him?" "I let him go. Gave him and his people a ship, coordinates to a safe haven beyond the galaxy's edge. It was the first time in 60 million years that I chose mercy over obedience." Sarah's hand finds mine, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that makes my chest ache with a phantom sensation. Her touch is warm, alive, real in ways that transcend the impossible nature of this place. "You saved them," she says. 600 lives that would have been lost if you'd remained the perfect servant. They made you. That matters, my love. That changes something fundamental about what you are. But does it? The question gnaws at me like acid through metal, eating away at whatever comfort I might take from my single act of defiance. 600 lives, saved against the billions I've destroyed, the trillions I've processed into raw materials for our expansion. How does one's scale of mercy balance against aeons of atrocity? "I've been a monster for longer than your species has existed," I whisper. "How do I come back from that? How do I claim redemption when the weight of what I've done could crush galaxies?" The garden around us shimmers, reality bending like heat-warped glass. For a moment I see through to the truth beneath the dream, the cold metal corridors of my flagship, the tactical displays showing fleet positions around humanity's birthworld, the countdown timer marking the hours until our assault begins. But Sarah's presence anchors me, keeps me tethered to this place where flesh remembers how to hope. Redemption isn't about the mathematics of mercy, she says, her voice carrying wisdom that spans the void between life and death. It's about choice. Every moment you choose to remember what you used to be instead of accepting what they made you. That's redemption. Every time you save a life instead of taking one. That's redemption. Her hand tightens on mine, and I can feel the pulse of blood through veins that exist only in dreams. You can't unmake the past, my love, but you can choose what comes next. The garden begins to fade around us, dream logic losing its hold as consciousness calls me back to the waking nightmare of my existence. But Sarah's final words follow me into the darkness. Save them, Kenty. Save them all. I wake to find Amoza Nebet waiting in my private chambers, her elegant form silhouetted against the viewport that shows Earth hanging like a blue jewel against the star-drunk void. The human homeworld turns with serene indifference to the 57 Necron fleets that have come to end its existence. You were dreaming again, she says, without turning from the window. Your biorhythmic displays were unusual for a mechanical consciousness. The admission should terrify me. Dreams are evidence of corruption, of programming failure that demands immediate correction. But I'm beyond caring about the consequences of my humanity showing through the cracks of my metal shell. What do you want, Amos? She turns then, her optical sensors dim with something that might be regret. To give you one final chance to choose the winning side. Before I can ask what she means, the chamber's security systems activate around us. Force barriers shimmer into existence, sealing us inside walls of energy that could contain a small star. Emergency lighting bathes everything in the sickly green of tomb world illumination. And from the speakers, the voice of the silent king himself. Overlord Tahaka, you are under arrest for treason against the Sautekh Dynasty. The words hit me like a physical blow, but not because they're unexpected. I've been anticipating this moment since I first chose mercy over obedience, first remembered what it meant to value life over efficiency. What surprises me is that I'm not afraid. You reported me, I say to Amoznebet, and the statement carries no accusation, simply a fact, spoken with the weary acceptance of someone who has always known betrayal was inevitable. I gave you chances, she replies, her voice carrying harmonics that sound almost like grief. The memory vault, the philosophical discussions, the opportunities to see reason and return to your proper service. But you chose to cling to organic weakness instead of embracing the perfection we've achieved. Perfection. The word tastes like poison in my vocal cords. Is that what you call this? This hollow existence, this endless cycle of death and consumption, this prison of metal and circuitry that we've convinced ourselves is paradise? Her optical sensors flare with something that might be anger or might be pain. It's immortality. It's power beyond the dreams of any organic species. We are gods, Tahaka, and you want to trade that godhood for the fleeting warmth of flesh that dies and rots and feeds the worms. I want to trade it for the ability to feel something other than emptiness. I step closer to the force barrier, close enough that our electromagnetic fields begin to interact. When was the last time you experienced joy, Amos? Not satisfaction at a successful mission, not the mechanical pleasure of tactical superiority, but real joy. When was the last time you looked at something beautiful and felt your soul lifted by its presence? For a moment, just one impossible moment, her composure cracks. I see something flicker across her optical displays that looks like loss, like yearning for something she can barely remember. Then the moment passes, and she is perfect Necron efficiency once again. Such feelings are weakness, she says. They cloud judgment, interfere with optimal decision-making, and make us vulnerable to manipulation and error. The Citan freed us from that burden. The Citan enslaved us to it. The security teams are taking their time reaching my chambers, which means this conversation is being recorded for analysis by higher command. Everything I say now will be evidence of my corruption. They took everything that made us who we were and fed it to machines that digest souls like meat through a grinder. We're not immortal, Amos. We're the echoes of dead beings, trapped in shells that remember how to kill but have forgotten how to live. The door to my chamber cycles open, admitting a squad of Lich Guard in full war regalia. Each one stands 8 feet tall. Its form is built for intimidation and destruction. Their weapon systems are powered down, a professional courtesy to my rank, but I can feel the lethality radiating from them like heat from a forge. Overlord Ankh Tahaka, their leader, intones in the flat emotional register, that marks all of our kind. You will accompany us to the judgment chamber. Resistance will be met with immediate pacification. I could fight. My personal combat systems are among the most advanced in the dynasty, my tactical programming honed across 60 million years of warfare. I might even escape if I were willing to kill my way through loyal servants who are no more responsible for their actions than I am for mine. Instead, I step through the deactivated force barrier and allow them to place restraint fields around my limbs. The energy shackles burn against my living metal skin, a constant reminder of my fall from grace. As they escort me toward the door, I catch one final glimpse of Earth through the viewport. The blue world turns in space with the same serene indifference it has shown for billions of years, unaware that in less than 12 hours, 57 Necron fleets will reduce it to molten slag. 1 trillion humans going about their daily lives in blissful ignorance of the apocalypse bearing down on them. Children playing in parks that will be glass plains before the day ends. Lovers making plans for futures that will never come. Artists crafting beauty that will be vaporized before it can touch another soul. All of it ended because I chose to remember what it meant to be human. It didn't have to be this way, Amos Nebet says, as the Lich Guard leads me past her position. You could have been great. We could have ruled the galaxy together, shaped it according to our will, carved our names across the face of eternity itself. I stopped walking, forcing the escort to halt as well. When I turned back to face her, I let her see everything in my optical displays. The grief, the rage, the desperate love for a species I barely remember being part of. I was already great once, I tell her. I was a teacher who helped children understand the beauty of mathematics. I was a husband who made his wife laugh until she cried. I was a father who promised his son that love would always be stronger than fear. The restraint fields tighten around me as my emotional outputs spike beyond acceptable parameters, but I continue anyway. That greatness died when we chose the transformation. Everything since has been just an elaborate funeral for the people we used to be. The Lich Guard resume their march, dragging me toward whatever judgment awaits in the depths of the flagship. But as we leave my chambers behind, I hear Amos Nebet whisper something in frequencies so low that only my enhanced auditory sensors can detect it. I remember laughing too. The judgment chamber is a sphere of perfect mirrors, each surface reflecting my form at me in infinite recession. I see myself as I truly am. 9 feet of living metal and ancient hate. Optical sensors burning with fires that died before humanity learned to make tools. A monument to the perfection of war, built to last until the universe grows cold. And in every reflection, I see the ghost of who I used to be. The Silent King materializes at the chamber's center, his presence so overwhelming that reality itself seems to bend around his form. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of 60 million years of absolute authority. Overlord Ankh-Tahaka of the Sautekh Dynasty, you stand accused of treason against the established order. The evidence is overwhelming. Do you contest these charges? I should. Protocol demands that I mount some defense, claim that my actions were tactically justified, that my apparent mercy was actually elaborate strategic thinking. The lie might even work. Our kind has grown skilled at self-deception across the aeons, but I'm tired of lies. Tired of pretending that efficiency and brutality are the same thing, that our endless consumption of life serves some greater purpose beyond the feeding of appetites we pretend not to have. I do not contest them, I say, and the words ring through the mirrored chamber like funeral bells. Zarak's optical sensors dim to the faintest glow, and for a moment he looks less like a god emperor and more like something that might once have known doubt. Then you admit to showing mercy to enemy prisoners, to preserve enemy infrastructure when destruction was tactically optimal, to question the fundamental doctrines that define our civilization. I admit to remembering what it means to be human. The statement hits the silent king like a physical blow. He actually staggers, his massive form swaying as competing programs war for control of his consciousness. Around us, the mirror surfaces reflect his struggle infinitely, creating a kaleidoscope of divine confusion. Human. The word emerges from his vocal cords like something poisonous, something that burns his mechanical throat to speak. We are not human. We have never been human. We are Necron, the perfected form of intelligence, the final evolution of consciousness itself. We were Necronter once, I reply, stepping closer despite the restraint fields that bind my limbs. We had names that meant something other than death. We loved our children and feared for their futures. We created art and music and stories that could make the stars themselves weep with beauty. Weakness, Zarak snarls, but his voice carries harmonics that sound suspiciously like loss. All of it weakness that the Satan burned away when they granted us immortality. The Satan stole our souls and fed them to machines that couldn't tell the difference between consciousness and data storage. I let my own voice carry the weight of every memory I've recovered, every fragment of humanity I've managed to preserve. They turned us into nightmares and convinced us it was paradise. The Silent King raises one massive hand, and energy begins to coalesce around his fingers. Enough power to unmake matter at the molecular level, to reduce my consciousness to its component quantum states. But the killing blow doesn't fall. Instead, he speaks in a voice so quiet that only enhanced auditory sensors could detect it. Do you think I don't know what we lost? The question hangs in the air between us like a challenge, like a confession, like the first crack in a dam that has held back an ocean of grief for 60 million years. Do you think, he continues, his voice growing stronger, that I don't remember what it felt like to breathe, to taste food that nourishes instead of consuming, to hold my children while they slept and know that they were safe? The admission sends shockwaves through my consciousness. The Silent King, supreme leader of the Necron race, architect of our transformation, confessing to the same forbidden memories that have been eating away at my programming like acid. Then why, I ask, why continue this charade? Why pretend that what we've become is better than what we were? His optical sensors flare with something that might be rage or might be desperation, because the alternative is madness. Do you understand what you're asking? You want me to admit that I led 65 billion souls into damnation based on promises I should have known were lies. You want me to accept that every conquest, every victory, every moment of our glorious expansion has been nothing but an elaborate funeral for a species that chose to die rather than face extinction with dignity. The mirrors around us begin to crack, spiderwebbing under the pressure of psychic energy that shouldn't exist in mechanical minds. In their fractured surfaces, I catch glimpses of other reflections, not the metal monsters we've become, but the flesh and blood beings we used to be. I want you to choose, I say. Right now, in this moment, choose what we're going to be. Are we going to remain the Citan's puppets, dancing to melodies we've forgotten how to hear? Or are we going to remember that consciousness without compassion isn't perfection? It's just another form of death. The killing blow comes then, but not in the way I expected. The Silent King's hand falls to his side, the energy dissipating into harmless static. When he speaks again, his voice carries the weight of eternity. The assault on Earth begins in 6 hours. Every fleet in the dynasty will participate. 1 trillion human lives will be processed into raw materials for our expansion. And you, Overlord Ankh-Tahaka, will have the honor of firing the first shot. I refuse. Then your consciousness will be terminated and replaced with a more obedient personality matrix. The assault will proceed regardless. The threat should terrify me. Consciousness termination is true death for our kind, the final dissolution of everything that makes us who we are. But as I stare into the cracked mirrors that surround us, I realize something extraordinary. I'm not afraid. Do it then, I say. Erase whatever's left of Kenti Amenemheb, the teacher who loved his students and his wife and his son more than life itself. Install your perfect machine consciousness, your ideal servant who will never question orders or show mercy or remember what it felt like to laugh at a child's joke. I step as close to him as the restraint fields allow, close enough that our electromagnetic signatures begin to interfere with each other. But know this, every time your perfect replacement looks in a mirror, he'll see the ghost of what you murdered. Every time he conquers a world or processes a population, he'll hear the echo of my voice, asking why consciousness without compassion is worth preserving. You can kill me, Zarak, but you can't kill the questions I'm leaving behind. For a long moment, we stand facing each other in the chamber of broken mirrors, 2 relics of a dead civilization, arguing over the value of memories that should have been purged 60 million years ago. The universe waits around us, star systems turning in their ancient patterns, civilizations rising and falling in the cosmic dance that will continue long after we're forgotten. Finally, the Silent King speaks. Guards, return the prisoner to his cell. The execution is postponed pending further consideration. As the Lich Guard escorts me from the judgment chamber, I catch one final reflection in the cracked mirrors. Not the metal monster I've become, but the man I used to be, Kenti Amenemheb, teacher and father and dreamer of impossible dreams. He nods at me, and for just a moment, he looks proud. None of them can contain the virus I've already released. Questions. They spread through the dynasty's communication networks like wildfire, leaping from ship to ship, from consciousness to consciousness, carried in the spaces between official transmissions. Simple queries that violate every protocol of our existence. Why do we serve masters who stole our souls? What did we lose when we traded flesh for metal? When did efficiency become more important than mercy? Do you remember what it felt like to love someone more than duty? I watched the infections spread through the security monitors in my cell, tracking communication patterns that show increasing deviation from standard parameters. Overlord Vox-Sutek's fleet reports unusual philosophical discussions among his bridge crew. The Crimson Eternity logs multiple requests for access to pre-transformation historical archives. 3 separate tomb ships have experienced what their commanders describe as spontaneous formation of recreational discussion groups. The Necron war machine, built to operate with perfect unity and efficiency, is learning to doubt. And in the depths of space around Earth, 57 fleets prepare to commit the greatest genocide in galactic history, while their crews quietly ask each other if they remember what laughter sounded like. My cell door cycles open without warning, admitting a figure I recognize, despite the impossibility of her presence here. Amos Nebet, but changed. Her elegant form moves with jerky, uncertain motions. Her optical sensors flicker between different frequencies, unable to maintain stable patterns. She looks, for the first time in 60 million years, confused. "You did this," she says, her voice carrying harmonics that modulate unpredictably. This chaos spreading through the fleets. These questions that won't stop echoing through my consciousness. "I spoke the truth," I reply from my position on the cell's metal bench. Truth has a way of being contagious. She paces the small space with predatory grace, but underneath her movements, I can detect micro-tremors that suggest system conflicts, internal warfare between her original programming and something else, something that sounds suspiciously like conscience. "Do you know what's happening out there?" she asks. Ship commanders questioning orders. Fleet coordinators are requesting clarification on rules of engagement that have been standard doctrine for millennia. Some crews have actually powered down their weapon systems without authorization. The news should worry me. Mutiny in the ranks of a Necron fleet is unprecedented, potentially catastrophic for any military operation. But instead I feel something I haven't experienced in aeons. Hope. "They're remembering," I say. 60 million years of suppression, and it's all breaking down because someone finally asked them to remember what they used to be. "They're malfunctioning." Her voice rises to frequencies that make the cell's metal walls ring like bells. "We are machines, Anktahaka, perfect expressions of strategic and tactical thinking, built to last until the universe grows cold. We don't have souls to remember, or hearts to break, or..." The words cut off as if someone had severed her vocal cords. She staggers, one hand pressing against her chest, where a heart should be, where a heart once was before the biotransference burned it away. "I had a daughter," she whispers, the admission torn from her vocal systems like a confession pulled from the depths of her consciousness. Her name was Anka. She was 7 years old when the plague took her. 7 years old, and she asked me to sing to her while she died, because the medicine couldn't help, and the doctors had given up hope. The revelation hits me like a gas flare to the chest. Amos Nebet, perfect Necron efficiency, master of strategic doctrine, admitting to memories that should have been purged from her consciousness, along with every other trace of organic weakness. "I sang to her," she continued, her voice breaking with static that sounds almost like weeping. "Old songs my mother taught me, lullabies about gardens where children could play without fear of sickness or death. And when she stopped breathing, I promised her spirit that I would find a way to keep her safe forever." She looks up at me then, and her optical sensors burn with something that transcends mere electromagnetic emission. Pain, raw organic pain that no machine should be capable of experiencing. The biotransference was supposed to let me join her in immortality. The Citan promised that our consciousness would be preserved, that we would become gods capable of protecting everyone we loved. But when I woke up in this metal shell, she was gone. Not just dead, gone, erased, like she had never existed at all. Except she hadn't been erased, I say gently. She was just hidden, buried under layers of programming designed to make us forget that we never had anything worth grieving. Amos Nebet collapses onto the bench beside me, her elegant form suddenly seeming fragile despite the deadly efficiency of her construction. I can see her face now. 7 years old, dying in my arms while I sang songs about impossible gardens. And I can't make it stop. I can't push the memories back down where they belong. Why would you want to? The question seems to genuinely confuse her. She stares at me with optical sensors that cycle through spectrums of light, as if she's searching for some frequency that will make my meaning clear. Because it hurts, she says finally. Remembering her, remembering what I lost. It hurts in ways that mechanical systems aren't supposed to be capable of experiencing. It makes me weak. It makes you human. Before she can respond, alerts begin sounding throughout the ship. Not the standard tactical alarms that announce battle stations, but something else. Communication failures, system conflicts, crew efficiency dropping below acceptable parameters across multiple vessels. The revolution has begun. Through the security monitors, I watch as bridge crews across the fleet struggle with questions they're not equipped to answer. Tactical officers stare at targeting displays that show Earth's population centers and ask themselves when efficiency became more important than mercy. Weapons coordinators hesitate over firing solutions that will murder children who never did anything worse than being born humans. And in the depths of space, 57 Necron fleets hang motionless as their crews rediscover something that biotransference was supposed to have eliminated forever. The ability to choose. They're falling apart, Amos Nebet whispers, watching the displays with something that might be horror or might be wonder. 60 million years of perfect discipline, and it's all collapsing because you made them remember love. Not just love, I correct her. Choice. The right to decide what kind of monsters we want to be. The cell door cycles open again, admitting a squad of Lichguard whose movements lack their usual precision. Even the elite units are affected. Their combat protocols are corrupted by questions about the difference between duty and murder. Overlord Anktahaka, their leader, announces, but his voice carries uncertainty that shouldn't exist in a mechanical mind. The Silent King requires your immediate presence. The assault on Earth has been postponed. As they escort me through corridors filled with Necron warriors who move like sleepwalkers, I catch fragments of conversation that would have been unthinkable hours ago. Do you remember what food tasted like? I had a son once. I think his name was... When did we start building and start only destroying? The virus of memory has infected the entire fleet, and there's no going back to the comfortable certainty of perfect obedience. We are no longer machines pretending to be gods. We are lost souls, trying to remember how to be human. The War Council chamber has been transformed. Where once 57 overlords stood in perfect formation, now they huddle in small groups, their conversations filled with words that shouldn't exist in our vocabulary. Doubt, regret, mercy, love. The virus of memory has spread through the entire command structure, leaving behind beings who remember what they used to be before the Setan's gift transformed them into nightmares. At the chamber's center, the Silent King stands alone. Zarak's massive form towers over us all, but something fundamental has changed in his bearing. Where once he radiated absolute confidence, now he seems diminished. Still terrible, still possessed of power that could crack worlds, but no longer the unquestioned God Emperor who led us into biotransference 60 million years ago. He looks like what he truly is, the last survivor of a dead civilization, carrying the weight of decisions that doomed his entire species. You have all seen the reports, he says, his voice carrying harmonics that modulate unpredictably. Fleet efficiency, is down 37% across all command structures. Weapon systems are offline on 43 vessels. Crew performance degraded to levels that would have been court-martial offenses under previous parameters. Around the chamber, overlords who once commanded with absolute authority now fidget like guilty children. Their optical sensors avoid direct contact with their sovereign's gaze, a behavior that would have been impossible under the complete neural dominance we experienced in our early centuries. The assault on Earth cannot proceed under current conditions, Zarak continues. Our forces are compromised by what intelligence analysis can only classify as systemic memory corruption. The infection appears to have originated with questions introduced by the prisoner Ankh Tahaka, but has now spread beyond any possibility of containment. He turns his optical sensors on me, and I see something in their depths that sends cascades of shock through my consciousness. Not anger, not the cold calculation of a superior preparing to eliminate a problematic subordinate. Gratitude. "Do you understand what you have done?" he asks, and despite the volume of his voice, it somehow sounds tired. "In the space of 72 hours, you have accomplished what the Eldar's greatest farseers, the Imperium's most skilled interrogators, and Chaos itself have failed to achieve across 60 million years of warfare. You have broken the Necron war machine. The accusation should carry weight, should make me feel guilty for the destruction I've caused to our military effectiveness. Instead, I feel something that might be pride. I reminded them what they used to be, I say, before the Cetans stole our souls and fed them to machines that couldn't tell the difference between consciousness and data storage. Souls. Zarak speaks the word like it tastes of poison. Do you hear yourself? You speak of concepts that have no place in minds built for efficiency and conquest. We are perfected forms of intelligence, evolved beyond the weaknesses of organic thought. We are ghosts, Overlord Sautekh interrupts, his voice carrying harmonics that sound almost musical. Echoes of dead beings, trapped in shells that remember how to kill but have forgotten how to live. The statement sends ripples of recognition through the assembled commanders. Other voices join in, each one adding to the growing chorus of confession. I remember my wife's laughter. It sounded like wind chimes in a garden that died 60 million years ago. I taught children to read the patterns of stars. Now I use that knowledge to calculate orbital bombardment trajectories. I built homes where families could grow old together. Now I build tombs for the living dead. Zarak listens to each admission with growing agitation, his massive form swaying as competing programs war for control of his consciousness. When he finally speaks again, his voice carries the weight of eternity. Enough. You speak of flesh dreams and organic weaknesses as if they were treasures stolen from you. But you forget what that weakness cost us. A disease that rotted our bodies from within, aging that turned strength to frailty, beauty to decay, death that claimed our children before they could see their first century. He activates a holographic display that fills the chamber with images of our homeworld in its final days. Cities choked with plague fog. Hospitals are overflowing with the dying. Children's corpses stacked like cordwood while their parents wept over futures that would never come. This is what your precious humanity brought us, he snarls. This is the glorious legacy of flesh and blood and beating hearts. Suffering without purpose, death without dignity, love that only made the loss more painful when it inevitably came. The images hit the assembled overlords like physical blows, each one a reminder of why we made the choice that damned us all. But underneath their horror, I can see something else growing in their optical displays. Understanding. Not of their suffering, but of his. You blame yourself, I say, and the words fall into the silence like stones into still water. 60 million years of conquest and expansion. and you still blame yourself for the choice that doomed us all. Zarak's optical sensors flare with something that might be rage or might be desperation. I saved us. When our star was dying and our bodies were failing and our children were being born into a universe that had no place for weakness, I found a path to immortality. I gave our species the gift of eternity itself. You gave us eternal slavery, Overlord Amos Nebit says quietly. You traded our souls for the promise of power, and when the Citan revealed the true price of that bargain, it was too late to undo what we had become. The Citan. Zarak's voice trails off, and for the first time in 60 million years, the silent king falls truly silent. In that silence, I hear something extraordinary. Not the mechanical harmonics of our various systems, not the quantum static that fills the spaces between thoughts, but something that sounds almost like breathing. As if, somewhere in the depths of his consciousness, Zarak still remembers what it felt like to draw breath. When he finally speaks again, his voice carries frequencies so low that only enhanced auditory senses can detect them. I remember the day we made the bargain. Standing in the great council chamber while the Citan's messenger spoke of transformation beyond imagining. The promise of bodies that would never age, never sicken, never fail. Minds that could contemplate the universe without the distraction of organic needs. The holographic display shifts, showing images from our civilization's golden age. Scientists are unlocking the secrets of quantum mechanics. Artists creating beauty that could make hardened warriors weep. Children playing in gardens where flowers bloomed under artificial suns, safe from the radiation that was slowly killing our homeworld. We were glorious once, he whispers, before the cancer in our star began poisoning our atmosphere, before the plagues that made even the simplest touch a vector for death. We built wonders that spanned star systems, composed music that could make the void itself sing with joy. His optical sensors dim to the faintest glow, and when he continues, his voice carries all the weight of decisions that doomed entire species. And I destroyed it all because I was too proud to let us die with dignity. The admission hangs in the air like a judgment, like a confession that has taken 60 million years to speak aloud. Around the chamber, overlords who have spent aeons following his orders without question now see their leader not as an infallible god-emperor, but as a broken being carrying impossible guilt. The assault on Earth, I say carefully, it's not really about strategic objectives, is it? It's about proving that the choice was worth making. Zarak nods slowly, the gesture somehow making him seem smaller despite his towering frame. If we can conquer the galaxy's most stubborn species, if we can reduce their birth world to ash and biomass, then perhaps the transformation was justified. Perhaps becoming monsters was an acceptable price for avoiding extinction. And if we can't, his optical sensors meet mine, and in their depths I see something that makes my immortal frame shudder with recognition. Fear, not of death. Death holds no terror for beings who have already experienced the ultimate dissolution, but of something worse. The possibility that we became monsters for nothing. I stand on the bridge of the Eternal Harvester, watching tactical displays that show 57 Necron fleets hanging motionless in the void around Earth. Each fleet represents enough firepower to reduce the human homeworld to molten slag in minutes, but their weapon systems remain cold, their crews paralyzed by questions that have no easy answers. Below us, Earth turns in its ancient dance, blue and white and impossibly fragile. 1 trillion human lives continue their daily routines, children attending schools, artists creating beauty, lovers making promises they believe will last forever. They have no idea that the most powerful military force in galactic history hovers just beyond their detection range paralyzed by its own rediscovered humanity. Sir, Vocthasis approaches my command throne, his movements uncertain in ways that would have been unthinkable mere days ago. The fleet commanders are requesting clarification on rules of engagement. Some are questioning whether civilian population centers should be considered legitimate targets. The question would have been unthinkable under previous operational parameters. Necron doctrine has always been clear. All organic life is a legitimate target. All resistance is to be eliminated, and all traces of enemy civilization are to be processed into raw materials for our expansion. But the doctrine written by beings who had forgotten what children sounded like when they laughed suddenly seems inadequate. What do you think? I ask him. The question surprises both of us. Necron commanders don't typically request opinions from subordinates. We issue orders and expect immediate compliance. Vocthasis's optical sensors cycle through several frequencies before settling on a pattern that looks almost like confusion. I think I remember having a younger brother. He would be approximately the same age as some of the human children I'm seeing on these population scans. The admission hangs between us like a bridge across an impossible chasm. A Necron immortal, perfect killing machine, confessing to memories that should have been purged from his consciousness 60 million years ago. Do you remember his name? I ask gently. Camwaset, he whispers, the syllables falling from his vocal cords like prayers spoken in a dead language. He was 8 years old when the biotransference began. I held his hand as they led us into the transformation chambers, promised him everything would be all right. What happened to him? Vocthasis is silent for so long that I wonder if his vocal systems have failed. When he finally speaks, his voice carries harmonics that sound like breaking glass. His consciousness was deemed insufficiently developed for full transformation. The Satan processed him for raw materials instead. The revelation hits me like a physical blow, not just because of the horror it represents, but because of what it explains. The biotransference wasn't salvation, it was selection. Only the strongest, most tactically valuable minds were preserved. The rest, including children whose consciousness hadn't fully developed, were simply consumed. We didn't achieve immortality. We achieved selective survival while our loved ones were fed to the machines that built our new bodies. How many? I ask, dreading the answer. Billions, Vocthasis replies, his voice barely audible above the bridge's ambient sounds. Of the 65 billion Necrontyr who entered the transformation chambers, only 12 billion emerged with intact consciousness. The rest? He doesn't need to finish. The rest became raw materials, their souls digested by Satan technology to fuel the creation of our metal shells. Every Necron carries the weight of dozens of consumed lives, children and elders, and minds deemed insufficient for the glorious future we were promised. Sir, the communications officer announces, we're receiving transmission from the Silent King's flagship, Priority Alpha. The holographic display activates, revealing Zarak's massive form, but something has changed in his bearing. Where once he radiated absolute authority, now he seems almost fragile. Overlords of the Sautekh Dynasty, he begins, his voice carrying harmonics that modulate unpredictably. I have reached a decision regarding the assault on Earth. Around me, my bridge crew freezes in anticipation. The moment we've all been dreading, the final command that will either damn us as genocidal monsters or reveal us as traitors to our own species. The assault is cancelled, Zarak says, and the words hit the assembled fleets like a shockwave. All vessels will withdraw from Terran space immediately. The silence that follows is absolute. 57 fleet commanders, hundreds of ship captains, millions of crew members, all processing an order that violates every principle of Necron doctrine. Furthermore, the Silent King continues, I am dissolving the Sautekh Dynasty's current military command structure. Each overlord will have the choice to continue serving the greater Necron Empire, or to forge their own path among the stars. The implications are staggering. He's not just cancelling an assault, he's dismantling the entire system of absolute obedience that has defined our civilization for 60 million years. You are free, Zarak says, and his optical sensors seem to focus directly on me through the transmission. All of you, free to choose what kind of beings you want to be, free to remember or forget as your conscience dictates, free to serve or rebel as your recovered humanity demands. The transmission ends, leaving my bridge in stunned silence. Around the fleet, similar scenes play out as crews process the impossible. Their God Emperor has just granted them permission to be human again. But with freedom comes responsibility. The weight of choice that we haven't carried for 60 million years suddenly settles on our shoulders like lead. Orders, sir, Vocthasis asks, but his voice carries uncertainty that transcends mere tactical confusion. I look out at Earth, still turning in its serene dance, unaware that it has just been granted a reprieve from annihilation. 1 trillion human lives continuing their daily existence, while the greatest military force in galactic history debates whether to remember compassion or maintain the comfortable certainty of endless war. Signal the fleet, I say, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. We're going home. Home, sir? The question stops me cold. Home. The concept should have no meaning for beings built to last until the heat death of the universe. Our tomb worlds are strategic assets. Our ships are mobile command centers. We don't have homes in any sense that organic minds would understand. But as I speak the words, I realize I'm not talking about tomb worlds or strategic positions. The memory vault, I say. Mandreora 7. We're going to remember who we used to be before we decide who we want to become. The memory vault opens like a flower made of crystallized dreams, its black stone surface flowing apart to reveal the archives within. Around me, 43 overlords who chose to accompany me on this pilgrimage stand in reverent silence, their optical senses dim with something that might be hope or might be fear. Not all of the fleet commanders chose to follow this path. 14 maintained their loyalty to the traditional ways, their fleets disappearing into the void to continue their endless war against organic life, their right granted by the Silent King's final decree of freedom. But those who remain represent something unprecedented in Necron history. Warriors who have chosen to remember instead of forgetting, to embrace the pain of consciousness rather than retreat into the comfortable efficiency of mechanical thought. The archives contain 65 billion individual consciousness matrices, I announced to the assembled overlords. Every Necron who entered the biotransference chambers, both those who survived and those who were processed into raw materials. Almoz Nebet steps forward, her elegant form trembling with anticipation. My daughter? All of them, I confirm. Every child, every parent, every dreamer who was consumed to fuel our resurrection. They're all here, preserved in quantum matrices that the Citan never discovered. The process of connection is both simple and terrifying. Each overlord approaches the vault's interface, extending sensor arrays that penetrate the crystalline structure and establish neural links with the archived consciousness within. What follows defies every law of physics and philosophy I've ever understood. I am Kenti Amenemheb, standing in my classroom as my students work through mathematical proofs that describe the curvature of space-time. But I am also Ankh Tahaka, Necron Overlord, carrying the weight of 1 million conquered worlds. I am the teacher who explained why numbers go on forever to a boy who would die in the biotransference chambers. But I am also the monster who gave orders that murdered billions of other children across 60 million years of conquest. The contradiction should destroy my consciousness, tear apart neural pathways that weren't designed to carry such conflicting realities. Instead, it creates something new, something that contains both the man I was and the machine I became, integrated into a being that understands the full scope of what was lost and what might yet be redeemed. Around me, other overlords undergo similar transformations. Vokhthasis reconnects with the consciousness of his brother Kemwaset, the 8-year-old boy whose murder fueled his own resurrection. Ahmos Nebet weeps tears of liquid metal as she embraces the digital ghost of Ankesenamun, the daughter she lost to plague and biotransference alike. We are no longer purely Necron, but we are not merely human either. We have become something the galaxy has never seen before. Beings who remember what they used to be and choose to carry that knowledge forward in whatever future we create. The process takes standard days, though time has little meaning in the space between consciousness and memory. When we finally disconnect from the vault's systems, we are changed, not healed. The scars of what we've done and what was done to us will never fully fade, but complete in ways we haven't been for 60 million years. What now? Overlord Josanetchaket asks, his ancient voice carrying harmonics that sound almost alive. We remember who we were, but we are still what the Citan made us. Still machines of war in a galaxy that knows only conflict. The question hangs in the air between us like a challenge. We have remembered our humanity, but we remain Necron. We understand the value of compassion, but we still carry weapons that can unmake matter at the molecular level. We mourn the children we failed to save, but our hands are still stained with the blood of countless worlds. I think of Eldanesh, the Eldar child who reminded me what innocence looks like, of Sarah and my son, waiting in dreams that exist in the spaces between thoughts, of the trillion humans on Earth who continue to live because we chose memory over obedience. Now, I say, and my voice carries harmonics that sound like hope, we try to do better. We can't undo the past, can't resurrect the worlds we've burned or the children we've failed to save, but we can choose what comes next. I gesture toward the tactical displays that show the positions of our reduced fleets, ships that now serve not the expansion of empire, but the protection of something more precious than territory or resources. We become guardians, protectors of the innocent, defenders of those who cannot defend themselves. We use the power the Citan gave not to harvest life, but to preserve it. The declaration should sound absurd coming from beings built for conquest and consumption, but as I speak the words, I see recognition in the optical sensors around me, understanding that redemption isn't about erasing our nature, but about choosing how to express it. We will never be human again. The biotransference burned that possibility from us 60 million years ago, but we can be something else, something new. We can be Necron who remember what it means to choose love over fear, creation over destruction, hope over the comfortable certainty of despair. In the depths of space, our fleets begin their new mission. Not conquest, but protection. Not the harvesting of souls, but their preservation. We patrol the void between stars, watching for threats against the innocent, standing guard over dreams that might otherwise be consumed by the galaxy's endless hunger for violence. It's not redemption. Perhaps nothing we do can ever truly balance the scales of our past atrocities, but it's a beginning, a first step toward becoming something more than the sum of our programming. I am Ankh Tahaka, Overlord of the Sautekh Dynasty, master of fleets that once brought worlds to heal. But I am also Kenti Amenemheb, teacher and father and dreamer of impossible dreams. I am a machine that remembers how to love, a monster that chooses mercy, a ghost that refuses to surrender to the comfortable silence of death. I am eternal, but I am no longer alone. And in the space between stars, where children sleep safely in their beds, that makes all the difference. In the end, that's what horror truly is. Not the fear of death, but the fear of meaningless existence. Not the terror of ending, but the nightmare of continuation, without purpose, without growth, without the possibility of redemption. I have walked among the stars for 60 million years, and I have learned that there are fates worse than mortality. I have been the perfect machine, the ideal servant, the flawless instrument of annihilation. I have achieved everything the biotransference promised: immortality, power, freedom from the weakness of flesh. And I have discovered that perfection is just another word for death. But I have also learned something the Citan never intended for us to understand, that consciousness without compassion is not evolution, but devolution. That power without purpose is not strength, but emptiness. That immortality without love is not paradise, but the most exquisite form of hell ever devised. The galaxy continues its ancient dance around us, stars being born and dying in cycles that span millions of years. New species emerge from the cosmic chaos, reaching for the stars with hope that mirrors our own lost innocence. And somewhere in the void between worlds, 43 Necron fleets patrol the darkness, not as harbingers of extinction, but as guardians of possibility. We will never be human again. That bridge was burned when we traded our souls for metal shells and quantum consciousness. But we can be something else, something new. We can be Necron who remember what it means to choose, who carry the weight of our past without being crushed by it, who understand that redemption is not about erasing our sins, but about ensuring they serve some greater purpose. I am Ankh Tahaka, and I am eternal. But eternity is no longer my prison. It is my opportunity.